The wagon wheels stopped turning, and 8-year-old Clara Mae Benton's world shattered in the dust of the Wyoming frontier. "Get out," her stepmother hissed, abandoning her on the merciless Oregon Trail. Alone, terrified, with nothing but a rag doll and fading hope, Clara faced certain death, until a mysterious horseman appeared on the ridge. This is the story of the orphan girl who lost everything and the broken rancher who saved her life. Stay until the end and comment your city so I can see how far this story has traveled. The late afternoon sun hung low over the Wyoming territory, casting long shadows across the endless prairie. The year was 1867, and the Oregon Trail stretched like a ribbon of broken dreams through the untamed West. Dust devils danced in the distance, and the wind carried the scent of sagebrush and desperation. Inside the cramped covered wagon, 8-year-old Clara Mae Benton pressed herself against the rough wooden side, trying to make herself invisible. Her small hands clutched a threadbare rag doll, the last thing her real mother had made before consumption took her 3 years ago. The doll's button eyes were loose, and its dress was nothing more than scraps, but Clara held it like it was made of gold. "Stop your sniveling back there," Martha Benton snapped from the driver's seat. The woman who had married Clara's father 2 years ago was all sharp angles and bitter words. Her face, weathered beyond her 30 years, twisted with perpetual displeasure. "You're lucky I didn't leave you back in Independence." Clara bit her lip hard enough to taste copper. She'd learned long ago that talking back only made things worse. Her father, Thomas Benton, had died of cholera 6 weeks into their journey west. One moment he was walking beside the wagon, talking about the green valleys of Oregon. The next, he was burning with fever, convulsing, gone. They'd buried him in a shallow grave marked with nothing but stones, just another casualty of the westward dream. After that, everything changed. "You're dead weight," Martha had told her the night after they buried Thomas. "Eating food that ain't yours, taking up space, your daddy's gone, and I got no use for his brat." The wagon train had left them behind 3 days ago. Martha had claimed Clara was too sick to travel, that they needed to rest. The wagon master, a grizzled man named Horace Turnbull, had looked at Clara with sympathy, but hadn't argued. One family falling behind was unfortunate, but not uncommon. The trail didn't wait for anyone. But Clara wasn't sick. Martha had simply decided she was done pretending to care. For 3 days they'd traveled alone, Martha driving the oxen with grim determination. Clara hadn't understood where they were going until this morning, when Martha turned the wagon south, away from the trail markers, toward nothing but wilderness. "Where are we going?" Clara had finally whispered. "You'll see soon enough." Now as the wagon jerked to a halt, Clara's heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. Through the gap in the canvas, she could see they were in the middle of nowhere. No trees, no water, no shelter. Just endless brown grass and distant mountains that looked like jagged teeth against the sky. Martha climbed down from the driver's seat with heavy, purposeful movements. She was a big woman, made bigger by the layers of dust-caked skirts and the fury that seemed to radiate from her like heat. "Get out," Martha said, yanking back the canvas cover. Clara didn't move. Couldn't move. Fear had turned her legs to stone. "I said get out!" Martha's hand shot out, grabbing Clara's thin arm and hauling her toward the back of the wagon. Clara's bare feet scrambled for purchase on the rough boards. Her shoes had worn through weeks ago, and Martha had refused to spare money for new ones. Clara landed hard in the dirt, the impact knocking the air from her lungs. She clutched her doll to her chest, feeling the loose button eye press into her palm. Martha stood over her, backlit by the setting sun, looking like a vengeful angel from the hellfire sermons the circuit preacher used to give back in Missouri. "This is where you get off, girl." "What?" Clara's voice came out as barely a whisper. I don't understand." "Course you don't. You're stupid as your daddy was, God rest his worthless soul." Martha walked back to the wagon and grabbed a small bundle, Clara's only other dress, torn and faded, and a tin cup. She threw them on the ground beside Clara. "There. I'm being generous. That's more than you deserve." But you can't." Clara scrambled to her feet, her entire body shaking. "You can't leave me here. There's nothing here. No people, no town, no—" "Exactly." Martha climbed back onto the wagon seat and gathered the reins. "You've been nothing but a burden since your daddy died. Eating my food, using my supplies. Well, I'm done. You can find your own way now. Please. Clara ran forward, reaching for the wagon wheel. Please, I'll be good. I'll work harder. I won't eat much, I promise. Please don't leave me. Martha cracked the whip over the oxen's backs. The animals lurched forward, and the wagon wheel nearly caught Clara's hand. She stumbled backward, falling again into the dirt. You'll die out here, Martha called back, not even turning around. But that ain't my problem no more. Your daddy should have thought about that before he up and died on me, leaving me with nothing but debts and a useless child. Please, Clara screamed, her voice breaking. Mama, please. But Martha Benton wasn't her mama, had never been her mama, and the word died in the empty air. Clara ran after the wagon, her bare feet pounding the hard-packed earth. Don't leave me, please, I'll die, please. But the wagon kept moving, pulling away faster than Clara's small legs could run. Within minutes, it was 50 yards away. Then 100. Then it was just a shape in the distance, a dark spot against the golden prairie, growing smaller and smaller until it disappeared over a rise. And then Clara was alone. Completely, utterly alone. She stood in the middle of the vast emptiness, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The wind picked up, pulling at her thin dress and tangling her dark hair. The sun was sinking lower now, maybe an hour from the horizon. When it set, the temperature would drop. She knew that much from the nights in the wagon. The days were hot, but the nights were cold enough to see your breath. Clara looked down at her doll, at those loose button eyes that seemed to stare back at her with the same helpless terror she felt. What do we do now? She whispered. The doll, of course, didn't answer. Clara's mind raced through possibilities, but there were none. She was 8 years old, alone on the frontier with no food, no water, no shelter, and no idea where she was. The wagon train was days ahead, and she didn't know how to track them. Even if she did, they'd never take her back without an adult to claim her. Tears streamed down her cheeks, cutting tracks through the dust on her face. Mama, she whispered, thinking of her real mother, the one with kind eyes and gentle hands, the one who used to sing her to sleep. Mama, I'm scared. But her mama was 3 years in the grave, buried beside a Missouri creek on land someone else owned now. Clara sank down in the dirt, wrapping her arms around her knees. The prairie stretched endlessly in every direction, indifferent to her existence. A hawk circled overhead, riding the thermals. In the distance, she thought she heard the yip of coyotes, though it might have been her imagination. She was going to die here. The thought came with strange clarity. She would die of thirst in a day or two, or freeze tonight, or the coyotes would come, or she'd start walking and collapse from exhaustion. Maybe someone would find her bones someday, but probably not. The prairie swallowed things. People disappeared out here all the time. I don't want to die, she whispered to the doll. I'm not ready to die. The sun inched lower. Shadows grew longer. Clara knew she should move, should try to find water or shelter, but where? In which direction? Everything looked the same. Endless grass, distant mountains, and sky. So much sky it made her dizzy. She forced herself to stand. Her legs wobbled beneath her. We have to try, she told the doll. Mama would want us to try. Clara started walking north, back the way the wagon had come, following the faint wheel ruts in the dirt. Maybe she could find the main trail. Maybe another wagon train would come through. Maybe someone kind would take her in. Maybe. It was the only word that kept her feet moving. She walked for what felt like hours, but was probably only 30 minutes. Her feet, already tough from weeks of going barefoot, still protested against the sharp stones and prickly vegetation. The bundle Martha had thrown held her other dress and the tin cup, and Clara tied it to her waist with a strip of fabric, but it banged against her leg with every step. The sun was touching the horizon now, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple and deep red. It was beautiful in a terrible way. Clara had never felt so small, so insignificant. She was a tiny speck in an enormous world that didn't care whether she lived or died. Her throat was parched. She'd had water that morning from Martha's canteen, but that felt like a lifetime ago. The tin cup mocked her with its emptiness. I need water, she whispered. Please, God, I need water. But there was no water. No creek, no stream, no miracle spring bubbling up from the earth, just dry grass and drier air. Clara's legs began to shake. She'd barely eaten in days. Martha had been forgetting to feed her more and more often. Weakness pulled at her, urging her to sit down, to rest, to give up. "No," she said aloud, her voice cracking. "No, I won't." But even as she said it, her foot caught on a rock and she fell forward, landing hard on her hands and knees. The impact sent a jolt of pain up her arms. The doll flew from her grasp, landing a few feet away in the dirt. Clara knelt there, breathing hard, staring at the doll. Part of her wanted to just stay there, to let the cold night come, to let it be over. She was so tired of being scared, of being alone, of being unwanted. Slowly she crawled forward and picked up the doll. One of the button eyes had finally come loose, hanging by a single thread. Clara carefully pulled it free and tucked it into the tiny pocket of her dress. "I'll fix you," she promised. When we get somewhere safe, I'll fix you." If they got somewhere safe. She stood again, swaying slightly. The world tilted and spun. She was so thirsty, so hungry, so alone. Clara took another step, then another. She fixed her eyes on a distant ridge, barely visible in the fading light, and made that her goal. Just get to the ridge. Then she could rest. Just get to the ridge. Behind her, the vast empty prairie stretched endlessly. Ahead, the ridge seemed impossibly far. But Clara kept walking, one small bare foot in front of the other, because stopping meant dying, and she wasn't ready to die. Not yet. Oh. High on that distant ridge, Samuel Holt sat astride his black stallion, surveying his domain through a brass spyglass. At 42, he was the wealthiest rancher in 3 counties, owner of the sprawling Double H Ranch that stretched from the Medicine Bow Mountains to the Platte River Valley. His cattle numbered in the thousands. His horses were sought after from Denver to Cheyenne, and his name commanded respect, sometimes fear, throughout the Wyoming Territory. But none of it meant a damn thing. Samuel lowered the spyglass and rubbed his weathered face. He'd come up here to be alone, as he often did when the emptiness of his life became too much to bear. From this vantage point, he could see his ranch house in the valley below, a massive log structure with a wraparound porch built to house a family he'd never have. 10 years ago, his wife Catherine had died giving birth to their son. The boy had lived only 3 hours, just long enough for Samuel to hold him, to memorize his tiny face, to name him Thomas before he stopped breathing. They were buried together in the family plot on the hill behind the ranch, beneath a cottonwood tree Catherine had loved. Samuel had buried his heart with them. He'd thrown himself into work, building the ranch into an empire, acquiring land and cattle and horses until he was the richest man for 300 miles. But wealth couldn't fill the silence in his house. Success couldn't ease the ache that woke him at 3 a.m., reaching for a wife who wasn't there. His housekeeper, Maria Alvarez, kept things running. She cooked and cleaned and tried to mother him, though he didn't deserve it. His ranch foreman, Tom Jessup, managed the men and the herds. Everyone did their jobs, and Samuel paid them well, but he was just going through the motions, living without really being alive. He raised the spyglass again, scanning the empty prairie more from habit than purpose. The sun was almost down now, the last light painting everything gold and crimson. In another 30 minutes, it would be dark. Time to head back, to eat a dinner he wouldn't taste, to sit by a fire that wouldn't warm him, to sleep in a bed that felt too big. Movement caught his eye. Samuel adjusted the focus, training the spyglass on something small moving across the prairie. At first he thought it was an animal, maybe a young antelope or a coyote, but the movement was wrong, too deliberate. His breath caught. It was a child. A small figure in a light-colored dress stumbling across the open ground, heading roughly north. Even from this distance, Samuel could see how the child wavered, how each step seemed to take enormous effort. What in God's name? He scanned the surrounding area, looking for a wagon, for adults, for any explanation of why a child would be out here alone as darkness fell. There was nothing. No one. Just the small figure growing smaller as distance and failing light began to swallow it. Samuel's jaw tightened. He'd seen enough death on the frontier to know what happened to children left alone in the wilderness. He'd helped bury them. Kids who wandered off from wagon trains, who got separated from hunting parties, who simply stepped into the vast emptiness and were never seen again. For a moment he hesitated. It wasn't his problem. The child had parents somewhere, probably. Someone was responsible for this situation. Getting involved meant complications, questions, possibly legal entanglements. The smart thing would be to ride down to the territorial marshal's office in the morning, report what he'd seen, let the law handle it. The smart thing. But through the spyglass, he saw the child fall, saw the small body hit the ground and lie still for several seconds before slowly, painfully, pushing back up. Saw the way the tiny figure clutched something, a doll maybe, to its chest before taking another stumbling step forward. Catherine's voice whispered in his memory, "The measure of a man isn't his wealth or his strength, Samuel. It's what he does when someone helpless needs him." Samuel lowered the spyglass and wheeled his horse around. "Let's go, Midnight," he murmured to the stallion. "We've got someone to find." The horse sensed his urgency and responded immediately, launching into a ground-eating gallop down the ridge. Samuel's mind raced as they descended. How long had the child been out here? Where had they come from? Why were they alone? The ridge was steep, forcing him to slow the horse on the treacherous descent. By the time he reached level ground, the light was fading fast, that brief twilight period before full darkness. Samuel oriented himself toward where he'd last seen the child and urged Midnight forward. "Call out!" he shouted into the growing darkness. "If anyone can hear me, call out!" Nothing but wind answered him. He rode in the direction he'd seen the child moving, standing in his stirrups to scan the ground. The prairie grass was knee-high in places, tall enough to hide a small body. If the child had collapsed again, he might ride right past without seeing them. "Hello?" he called again. "Anyone out here?" Then he saw it. A small bundle lying in the grass about 30 yards ahead. Samuel's heart sank. He'd seen too many bodies on the frontier, knew what death looked like. But as he approached, the bundle moved. The child was on hands and knees, crawling now, too weak to stand. Samuel dismounted quickly, ground-tying Midnight, and approached slowly so as not to frighten the small figure. "Easy now," he said softly. "I'm not going to hurt you." The child looked up, and Samuel felt something crack open in his chest. It was a girl maybe 8 or 9 years old, with dark tangled hair and huge eyes and a dirt-streaked face. She clutched a ragged doll to her chest and stared at him with a mixture of terror and desperate hope. "Please," she whispered, her voice cracked and dry. "Please don't hurt me." Samuel knelt down slowly, removing his hat. "I won't hurt you, child. I promise. My name's Samuel Holt. I have a ranch not far from here. Are you lost?" The girl's eyes filled with tears that spilled down her cheeks. "My stepmother, she left me. She said I was dead weight." White-hot fury blazed through Samuel's chest, but he kept his voice gentle. "She left you here? On purpose?" The girl nodded, clutching the doll tighter. "My daddy died. On the trail. And she didn't want me anymore." Samuel had to take a slow breath to control his anger. What kind of woman abandoned a child in the wilderness? What kind of monster looked at this small, helpless creature and saw nothing but inconvenience? "What's your name?" he asked gently. "Clara May Benton." She swayed slightly, and Samuel realized she was at the end of her strength. "And this is Lily." She held up the doll, and Samuel saw that one of its button eyes was missing. "Well, Miss Clara May," he said, keeping his tone warm and steady, "I'm very pleased to make your acquaintance, and Lily's too. Now, I know you've had a terrible day, but I'm wondering if you'd do me the honor of coming back to my ranch for supper. My cook makes the best beef stew in the territory, and I believe she just baked an apple pie this morning." Clara stared at him, clearly wanting to trust but afraid. I don't have any money. I can't pay." "Good thing I don't charge little girls for supper," Samuel said with a small smile. "It's against my policy. Bad for business." The tiniest smile flickered across Clara's face before fading. What if you're mean? What if you're like her?" Samuel's heart broke a little more. This child had learned not to trust, and he couldn't blame her. "That's a fair question," he said seriously. "I can't prove I'm not mean just by saying so. But I can tell you this. I've got a housekeeper named Maria who runs my household and doesn't stand for any nonsense. If I was mean, she would have boxed my ears and quit years ago. And I've got ranch hands who've worked for me for over a decade. Mean men don't keep good people around." Clara considered this. her young mind working through the logic. Finally, she nodded slightly. Okay. Okay, you'll come. Yes, sir. Good. Samuel stood and held out his hand. Can you stand? Clara tried, but her legs buckled. Samuel caught her before she fell, feeling how light she was, how thin beneath the threadbare dress. Fury at her stepmother blazed anew, but he pushed it down. Right now, this child needed help, not his anger. Here, he said gently. I'm going to pick you up and put you on my horse. Is that all right? Clara nodded, too exhausted to protest. Samuel lifted her carefully. She weighed almost nothing, and settled her in the saddle. She clutched her doll with one hand and gripped the saddle horn with the other. Samuel mounted behind her, one arm around her waist to keep her steady. Just lean back against me, he said. I won't let you fall. As they started back toward the ranch, Clara's head dropped against his chest. Within minutes, she was asleep, her body finally surrendering to exhaustion. Samuel held her carefully, this small broken creature that someone had thrown away like trash. The ranch house was lit up in the distance, warm lamplight glowing in the windows. As they rode closer, Samuel found himself thinking about empty rooms that had stayed empty for 10 years. About a nursery he couldn't bear to enter. About toys packed away in a trunk, waiting for a child who would never play with them. About how maybe, just maybe, God had put him on that ridge tonight for a reason. The horse's steady rhythm lulled Clara deeper into sleep as they approached the ranch. Samuel could feel her small body completely relaxed against him now, her breathing soft and even. In her hand, the ragged doll hung limply, and Samuel found himself wondering about the story behind it, who had made it, when, and with what hopes for this child's future. The Double H Ranch spread before them in the gathering darkness like a small town unto itself. The main house dominated the landscape, a 2-story log structure with broad porches and river stone chimneys. Flanking it were the bunkhouse where his ranch hands lived, the massive barn that could shelter 50 horses, the smokehouse, the spring house, and various outbuildings that supported the operation of a working cattle empire. Corrals stretched in neat geometric patterns, and beyond them, thousands of acres of prime grazing land rolled toward the mountains. Samuel had built all of this with Catherine in mind, planning for the family they would raise, the dynasty they would create. Now it stood as a monument to dreams that had died with her. As they entered the main yard, the front door burst open and Maria Alvarez rushed out, wiping her hands on her apron. She was a sturdy woman in her early 50s with steel gray hair pulled back in a severe bun, but her dark eyes were warm and intelligent. She'd been with Samuel since before Catherine died, had held him when he wept at his wife's graveside, had kept the household running when he wanted to crawl into a bottle and never come out. "Senor Samuel," she called in her accented English. "Where have you been? Dinner is getting cold and—" She stopped abruptly when she saw the child in his arms. "Dios mío, who is this?" "Her name's Clara May," Samuel said quietly, dismounting carefully so as not to wake her. "I found her on the prairie, abandoned." Maria's expression shifted from surprise to fury to tender compassion in the space of a heartbeat. "Abandoned? Who would—" She cut herself off, moving closer to examine the child. Her practiced eyes took in the dirty face, the tangled hair, the too thin body beneath the threadbare dress. "Bring her inside, quickly, before the night air makes her sick." Samuel carried Clara up the porch steps and into the house. The warmth hit him immediately. Maria always kept the fires burning and the lamps lit, refusing to let the house become as cold and empty as Samuel's heart. She led him upstairs to one of the unused bedrooms, turning down the quilts on a 4-poster bed that dwarfed the small figure in his arms. "Should I wake her?" he asked. "No, let her sleep. But we need to get her out of these rags and cleaned up. She probably has not bathed in weeks." Maria moved to the washstand and poured water from the pitcher into the basin. "You go. This is women's work." Samuel hesitated, looking down at Clara's sleeping face. Even in rest, there was tension around her eyes, a wariness that no child should carry. "Who did this to her?" Maria asked softly. "Her stepmother. The child's father died on the trail, and the woman just left her, drove away, and left her to die." The words tasted like poison in his mouth. Maria crossed herself. "Monstruo," she whispered. "Monster. But God sent you to find her, see? You were meant to be there. Maybe. Samuel carefully laid Clara on the bed, and she immediately curled into a ball, still clutching her doll. I'll leave you to it. Holler if you need anything. He turned to go, but Maria's voice stopped him. Senor Samuel? Yes? She is staying, no? This child, she is staying here? Samuel met her eyes and saw the hope there, the same hope he felt stirring in his own chest despite every logical reason to squash it. She's been through hell, Maria. I can't turn her out. Bueno.
That is what I thought. Maria smiled, and it transformed her usually stern face. Now go. Let me make this niña presentable. Samuel descended the stairs and headed for his study, but his foreman, Tom Jessup, intercepted him in the hallway. Tom was a weathered man of 50 with a salt and pepper beard and eyes that missed nothing. Boss, Maria said you brought a kid home. That true? Found her on the prairie, abandoned by her stepmother. Tom's jaw tightened. Christ, some people don't deserve to breathe the same air as decent folks. The girl all right? Exhausted, dehydrated, half-starved, but alive. Maria's seeing to her now. She got people? Anyone we need to contact? Samuel shook his head. Father's dead. The stepmother drove off and left her to die. Far as I'm concerned, that woman doesn't deserve to be called people. Agreed. Tom studied him carefully. You thinking of keeping her? The question hung in the air between them. Samuel hadn't voiced it yet, hadn't even fully formed the thought in his own mind, but hearing it spoken aloud made something click into place. I don't know yet, he said finally. But I won't send her to an orphanage, Tom. I won't have her passed from place to place like unwanted baggage. Tom nodded slowly. Might be good for you, for the house. It's been too quiet around here for too long. Don't get ahead of yourself. Right now she needs food and rest and safety. We'll figure out the rest later. But even as he said it, Samuel felt something shifting inside him, like ice breaking up after a long winter. He retreated to his study and poured himself a whiskey, staring into the fire without really seeing it. The house felt different tonight. The silence seemed less oppressive somehow, as if the simple presence of a child under his roof had changed the very air. Upstairs, Maria worked with gentle efficiency. She carefully undressed Clara, noting every bruise, every mark that spoke of rough treatment and hard travel. The child stirred occasionally but didn't wake, her body too desperate for rest to fully surface. Maria filled the basin with warm water and began washing the dirt from Clara's face and arms, humming a Spanish lullaby her own mother had sung to her. The child's dark hair was matted and tangled, full of prairie dust, and who knew what else. It would need a proper washing, but that could wait until morning. As she worked, Maria found herself remembering another child, another time. Her own daughter, Elena, lost to fever when she was just 7 years old. That had been 30 years ago, back in Mexico before she and her husband came north. Carlos had died 10 years later in a mine collapse, leaving Maria alone in a foreign land. She'd found work at the Double H Ranch just before Catherine Holt had gotten pregnant. Catherine had been kind to her, treating her as a friend rather than a servant. When Catherine died in childbirth, Maria had mourned her almost as much as Samuel had. She'd stayed on because someone needed to keep the household running, but also because leaving felt like abandoning Catherine's memory. Now, looking down at this small, abandoned girl, Maria felt something stir in her heart that she'd thought long dead. The maternal instinct she'd buried with Elena, the fierce protectiveness that had no outlet for 3 decades. Pobrecita, she whispered, brushing Clara's damp hair back from her forehead. Poor little one, you have had such a hard road, but you are safe now. I promise you, you are safe. She dressed Clara in one of Samuel's old shirts. There were no children's clothes in the house. Hadn't been since Thomas was born and died in the same day. The shirt swallowed the child's small frame, but it was clean and soft. Maria tucked her under the quilts, adjusting the ragged doll so it lay beside her on the pillow. For a long moment, Maria simply stood there, watching Clara sleep. Then she made the sign of the cross and whispered a prayer of thanks that Samuel had been on that ridge tonight, that God had put him in the right place at the right time. Downstairs, she found Samuel still in his study, staring at nothing. She is clean and sleeping, Maria reported. Tomorrow I will wash her hair properly and see about getting her some decent clothes. Thank you, Maria. De nada. It is no trouble. She paused. Senor Samuel, what will you do with her? I don't know yet, but she's staying here for now, at least until we figure out what's best for her. Maria nodded, satisfied. I will make up the room properly tomorrow, and I will cook her favorites. Do you know what she likes? I don't know anything about her except her name and that she's been through hell. Then I will make many things, and we will discover what makes her smile. Maria moved to the door, then turned back. You did a good thing tonight, senor. A very good thing. After she left, Samuel sat alone with his whiskey and his thoughts. The house settled around him, creaking and sighing as houses do. Somewhere above, a child slept in a bed that had been empty for 10 years. And Samuel Holt, the wealthiest rancher in 3 counties, the man who had everything except what mattered most, allowed himself to feel something he hadn't felt in a decade. Hope. Morning came bright and clear, the sun spilling golden light across the Wyoming landscape. Samuel woke early as always, dressed, and headed downstairs to find Maria already in the kitchen, preparing what looked like enough food to feed the entire ranch crew. Is all that for Clara? He asked. Si. I do not know what she will eat, so I make everything. Eggs, bacon, flapjacks, biscuits, gravy, fried potatoes. Maria gestured to the various pots and pans bubbling on the massive cast-iron stove. When she wakes, she will eat. If she can eat all that, I'll be impressed. She will not eat all of it, but she will eat something, and then we will know. Maria cracked another egg into the skillet. You should go check on her. She may be frightened, waking in a strange place. Samuel climbed the stairs and approached the guest room quietly. The door was ajar, and he could hear soft sounds from within, not quite crying, but close. He knocked gently. Clara? May I come in? Silence. Then a small voice. Yes, sir. He pushed the door open to find Clara sitting up in bed, clutching her doll and looking around the room with wide, uncertain eyes. Her hair stuck up in all directions, and Samuel's shirt hung off one thin shoulder. Good morning, he said gently. Did you sleep well? Clara nodded slowly. Where am I? You're at my ranch, the Double H. Do you remember last night? I found you on the prairie? Her face crumpled slightly. I thought maybe I dreamed it, that I was still out there. No dream. You're safe now. Samuel moved closer but maintained a respectful distance. Are you hungry? My housekeeper Maria has been cooking up a storm downstairs. Clara's stomach growled audibly, answering for her. She blushed. I'm sorry. Nothing to apologize for. Growing girls need to eat. He smiled. How about we get you downstairs and feed you properly? Clara slid out of the enormous bed, her bare feet dangling for a moment before touching the floor. She was so small, drowning in his shirt. Samuel felt that protective fury rise again at the thought of anyone abandoning this child. Can Lily come? Clara held up her doll. Of course, Miss Lily is a guest too. That earned him a tiny smile, the first real one he'd seen from her. Clara followed him downstairs, staying close, but not quite touching him. They entered the kitchen to find Maria setting out enough food for 6 people. Ah, buenos dias, niña, Maria beamed at Clara. Come, sit. You must be starving. Clara climbed onto a chair at the kitchen table, and Maria immediately began piling food onto a plate. Clara stared at the mountain of eggs, bacon, and biscuits with something like disbelief. I can't eat all this, she whispered. Eat what you can, Samuel said, taking a seat across from her with his own more modest plate. The rest won't go to waste. Clara picked up a fork and took a tentative bite of eggs, then another. Then she was eating faster, shoveling food into her mouth like she was afraid someone would take it away. Slow down, mija, Maria said gently. The food is not going anywhere. No one will take it from you. Clara forced herself to slow down, but Samuel could see the effort it took. How long had she been hungry? Weeks? Months? He thought about Martha Benton and what he'd like to do if he ever met the woman. None of it was civilized. Clara, he said carefully, I need to ask you some questions about what happened. Is that all right? Clara nodded, her mouth full of biscuit. You said your father died on the trail? She swallowed hard. Yes, sir, 6 weeks ago. It was cholera. He was fine in the morning, and by nighttime.
She stared at her plate. They buried him beside the trail. We didn't even have a proper marker. I'm sorry. That must have been terrible. My real mama died 3 years ago, back in Missouri. Consumption. Clara's voice was flat, reciting facts. Papa said we needed a new start, so he married Martha, and we joined a wagon train headed for Oregon, but then he died, and Martha said I was dead weight. Maria made a distressed sound and crossed herself. Did she hurt you? Samuel asked quietly. Before she left you? Clara shook her head. Not really. She hit me sometimes, but mostly she just didn't care. After Papa died, she stopped pretending to be nice. She said I ate too much food and took up too much space, and she wished Papa had left me behind in Missouri. That woman deserves— Maria cut herself off, glancing at Clara. She deserves God's judgment. Do you have any other family? Samuel asked. Grandparents, aunts or uncles? No, sir. Papa said we were all that was left of the Bentons. His parents died before I was born, and Mama's family didn't want anything to do with us after she married Papa. They said he was beneath her. Clara took another bite of bacon. What's going to happen to me now? It was the question Samuel had been dreading. I don't know yet, but you're welcome to stay here while we figure it out. You're safe. You'll be fed and clothed and cared for. That's a promise. Clara studied him with those two old eyes. Why are you being nice to me? You don't even know me. Because it's the right thing to do. Because no child should be abandoned to die. Because— Samuel paused, searching for words. Because everyone deserves kindness, especially people who haven't received enough of it. Something flickered in Clara's expression, a cautious hope tempered by experience. She'd been disappointed before. She'd learned not to trust. Samuel could see it in every line of her small body, in the way she held herself ready to run at any moment. Finish your breakfast, he said gently. Then Maria will help you get properly cleaned up and find you some clothes that actually fit. After that, if you're feeling up to it, I thought maybe I could show you around the ranch. We have horses. Do you like horses? For the first time, Clara's face lit up. I've never been on a horse. Well, except last night on yours, but I was mostly asleep. Then we'll fix that today. Every person who lives at the Double H needs to know how to ride. He paused, realizing what he'd said. If you want to learn, that is. Yes, Clara said, then immediately looked embarrassed by her enthusiasm. I mean, yes, sir. I'd like that. Good. It's settled then. After breakfast, Maria whisked Clara away for a proper bath. Samuel could hear water being heated, doors opening and closing, Maria's voice offering soft encouragements. He retreated to his study to deal with ranch business, trying to focus on account books and shipping schedules, but his mind kept drifting upstairs. What was he doing? He'd brought a child into his home on impulse, made promises he wasn't sure he could keep. The sensible thing would be to contact the territorial authorities, let them place Clara in an orphanage, or find her a suitable family. He was a middle-aged bachelor rancher with no experience raising children. What did he know about little girls? But every time he thought about sending her away, he remembered how she'd looked on the prairie, small and alone and terrified. He remembered the feel of her slight weight in his arms, the way she'd clung to that ragged doll like it was all she had left in the world, which it probably was. A knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. Come in. Maria entered, her expression serious. Senor, I need to speak with you. About Clara. Si. I have bathed her and— Maria paused, choosing her words carefully. She has bruises. Old ones, mostly faded, but they tell a story. That woman hit her more than once, and she has scars on her back that look like they came from a switch or a belt. Samuel's hands clenched into fists. Christ. There is more. She is very thin, thinner than she should be. She has been underfed for a long time, I think. Months, maybe. And her feet, Dios, her feet are tough as leather from walking barefoot. Her shoes wore out and the stepmother would not replace them. That woman should hang, Samuel said flatly. Perhaps, but right now we must focus on the child. She needs clothes, proper shoes, good food, and time to heal. Not just her body, but her spirit. She is a frightened little bird, senor. It will take patience and kindness to help her trust again. I'm not good with children, Maria. I don't know what to say to her, how to act around her. You treat her with respect and kindness, which is what you have been doing.
That is enough. Maria moved closer, her dark eyes intense. Senor Samuel, I see how you look at her. I see what is in your heart. You want to keep her, no? Samuel was quiet for a long moment. Then, yes, God help me, yes. But wanting something doesn't make it right or possible. Why not possible? I'm a single man. The law might not allow it. And even if they do, what do I know about raising a daughter? I'd probably make a mess of it. You would not be alone. I am here. And you underestimate yourself, senor. You have a good heart, even though you have kept it locked away for 10 years. Maria's voice softened. That little girl needs a father. And you, I think, need a daughter. Sometimes God gives us what we need in unexpected packages. Before Samuel could respond, they heard light footsteps on the stairs. Clara appeared in the doorway, transformed. Maria had washed and braided her dark hair, revealing delicate features beneath the grime. She wore one of Maria's dresses, hastily altered to fit, and actual shoes, old ones of Maria's, stuffed with fabric to make them fit Clara's small feet. Well now, Samuel said, his throat tight. Don't you look fine? Clara twisted shyly, smoothing the skirt. It's too big, but Miss Maria said she'd make me proper clothes soon. You look perfect, Samuel said, and meant it. Ready to see the ranch? Clara nodded eagerly, and they headed outside into the bright morning. The ranch was in full swing now, horses being led to corrals, ranch hands moving between buildings, the distant sound of cattle lowing in the fields. The air smelled of hay and horses, and the peculiar scent of high prairie grassland. Samuel led Clara toward the main barn, aware of the curious glances from his men. He'd have to tell them something, but that could wait. Right now, he wanted to see Clara smile again. In the barn, a dozen horses occupied the stalls, munching hay and swishing their tails at flies. Clara's eyes went wide. They're so big, she breathed. These are the workhorses and a few of my personal mounts. The rest of the herd is out in the pastures. Samuel walked down the row of stalls. This is Midnight. You met him last night. That's Thunder, and that's Sage, and over there is Buttercup. Buttercup? Clara giggled at the name. She's a gentle old mare, sweetest horse you'll ever meet. I thought maybe she could be your horse, if you'd like. Clara's mouth fell open. My horse? I could have my own horse? Well, she'd technically be mine, but you could ride her, take care of her, learn on her. Would you like that? Yes. Clara rushed to Buttercup's stall. The golden mare turned her head and nickered softly. Clara reached out tentatively, and Buttercup nuzzled her hand, searching for treats. Samuel felt something warm unfold in his chest. Here, he said, pulling a sugar cube from his pocket. Hold your hand flat, like this. He demonstrated, and Clara copied him. Buttercup delicately took the sugar cube, her soft lips barely touching Clara's palm. Clara laughed, a real, delighted laugh that echoed in the barn. She likes me. Of course she does. Buttercup has excellent taste. Samuel pulled out another sugar cube and handed it to Clara. You want to try giving her one yourself? For the next hour, Samuel showed Clara around the ranch, introducing her to the animals, explaining how everything worked. Clara absorbed it all with the quick intelligence of a bright child who'd been denied education and stimulation. She asked questions, good questions, and Samuel found himself enjoying the role of teacher. They were examining the new foals in the paddock when Tom Jessup approached, hat in hand. Boss, got a minute? Sure, Tom. Clara, you stay right here by the fence, all right? Don't climb over. Yes, sir. Samuel walked a few paces away with Tom, who glanced back at Clara before speaking in a low voice. Word's getting around among the men about the girl. They're curious. I imagine they are. You planning on keeping her? I don't know yet, but she's staying for now. Tom nodded slowly. The men won't have a problem with it. They're good boys, most of them. Just wanted you to know that folks will talk. Single man raising a young girl. Some people might not understand. Let them talk. I've never cared what people thought before, and I'm not about to start now. Fair enough. Oh, and Maria sent me to tell you lunch is ready. She says the little one needs to eat regularly if she's going to put meat on her bones. Samuel turned back to find Clara still at the fence, watching the foals play with such longing on her face that it hurt to see. Clara, time for lunch.
Can I come back after to see the horses? You can come back any time you want. You live here now. The words were out before Samuel fully thought them through, but once said, he didn't want to take them back. Clara's face transformed, hope and uncertainty warring in her expression. I do? Really? Really, for as long as you need, or want. Clara ran to him and before he could react, wrapped her thin arms around his waist. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Samuel stood frozen for a moment, then carefully, tentatively, placed his hands on her small shoulders. You're welcome, Clara May. They walked back to the house together, Clara chattering now about the horses and the foals, and did he think she could learn to ride soon? Maybe tomorrow? Samuel listened and answered, feeling the ice around his heart continuing to crack and thaw. Maria had lunch waiting, thick sandwiches and fresh lemonade. Clara ate with better manners this time, no longer afraid the food would vanish. Afterward, Maria announced she had sewing to do, and would Clara like to help? I don't know how to sew very good, Clara admitted. Then I will teach you. Every young lady should know how to sew. Maria led her toward the sitting room, leaving Samuel alone with his thoughts, once again. He walked through the house, seeing it with new eyes. The empty rooms that had haunted him now seemed full of possibility. The silence that had oppressed him felt different, with Clara's voice occasionally drifting from the sitting room, asking questions about stitches and seams. That evening, after another enormous dinner that Clara only partially conquered, Samuel suggested she might like to see the library. The room had been Catherine's favorite, filled floor to ceiling with books she'd collected from Denver and even as far as San Francisco. Clara's eyes went wide. I've never seen so many books. Can you read? Yes, sir. Mama taught me before she died, but I haven't had any books since then. Martha said they were a waste of space. Samuel felt that now familiar fury at the woman's name. Well, you have all the books you could want now. Take your time. Look around. If you find one you'd like, you can take it to your room. Clara moved reverently among the shelves, trailing her fingers over the spines. She pulled out a volume of fairy tales and hugged it to her chest. Can I really keep this? In my room? It's yours. All of these are yours to read whenever you want. That night, after Maria had tucked Clara into bed, Samuel stood in the doorway of her room, watching her sleep. She looked peaceful now, her face relaxed in sleep, one hand resting on her doll, the book of fairy tales on the bedside table. You are thinking very hard, Senor, Maria said softly, appearing beside him. I'm thinking I have no idea what I'm doing. None of us do. But you are doing it anyway, and that is what matters. Maria touched his arm. She is already different than she was this morning, already less frightened. You give her something she has not had in a long time. What's that? Safety, kindness, a home, Maria smiled. Do not overthink this, Senor Samuel. Your heart knows what to do. Let it lead. As Samuel lay in his own bed later that night, he thought about the day, about Clara's laughter in the barn and her wonder in the library and the way she'd hugged him. He thought about empty rooms that might not have to stay empty anymore, about a future that might include more than just work and whiskey and waiting to die. For the first time in 10 years, Samuel Holt allowed himself to imagine something beyond survival. He allowed himself to hope that maybe, just maybe, God had given him a second chance at the family he'd lost. And he fell asleep with a prayer on his lips, that he would be worthy of the trust he saw in Clara's eyes, that he could protect her and help her heal, that he could be the father she deserved. In the next room, Clara slept deeply, dreaming of horses and books and a big house full of warmth. And for the first time since her real mother died, she felt safe. The days that followed settled into a rhythm that surprised Samuel with its naturalness. Each morning, Clara would wake to sunlight streaming through her window and the smell of Maria's cooking wafting up from the kitchen. She'd dress in the simple clothes Maria had quickly sewn for her, 3 dresses now, all properly fitted, and undergarments that actually belonged to a child instead of being makeshift alterations. Her feet had real shoes, sturdy leather boots that Maria had ordered from the general store in town. By the end of the first week, Clara had gained back some of the weight she'd lost, her cheeks filling out and color returning to her skin. The dark circles under her eyes faded. The constant wariness in her posture began to ease, though it never quite disappeared. Samuel understood that. Trust, once broken, took time to rebuild.
Maria had taken to the role of teacher with enthusiasm. In the mornings, before the heat of the day set in, she'd sit with Clara at the kitchen table and work on reading, writing, and arithmetic. Clara soaked up the lessons like desert sand absorbing rain, hungry for knowledge after years of neglect. "She is very bright," Maria told Samuel one evening after Clara had gone to bed. "Very bright indeed. With proper schooling, she could go far." "There's a school teacher in town," Samuel mused, "Mrs. Henderson, though I hear she's getting on in years and thinking of retiring. Perhaps when Clara is ready. For now, she needs time to simply be a child, to play and laugh and not be afraid." Samuel had taken it upon himself to teach Clara about ranch life. Every afternoon, they'd walk the property together, Samuel explaining the workings of the operation while Clara asked endless questions. How did you know when a cow was sick? Why did the horses need their hooves trimmed? What did the different brands mean? How far did the ranch extend? Her questions delighted him, reminding him of his own childhood wonder at the world. He found himself explaining things he'd taken for granted for decades, seeing them fresh through her eyes. The highlight of Clara's day was always the time spent with Buttercup. True to his word, Samuel had made the gentle mare Clara's special charge. Under his careful supervision, Clara learned to brush and groom the horse, to clean her hooves, to measure out feed. Buttercup responded to the attention with patient affection, standing still while Clara worked and nickering softly when she approached. "When can I ride her?" Clara asked for the 10th time, running her brush down Buttercup's golden flank. "Soon," Samuel promised. "First you need to be comfortable around her. Horses can sense fear, and they respond to confidence. You're building that now, learning her moods, understanding how she communicates." "She talks to me," Clara said seriously. "Not with words, but I know what she means. Like when she swishes her tail fast, she's annoyed by flies. And when she stamps her foot, she's impatient. And when she does that soft nicker thing, she's happy to see me." "Exactly right. You're a natural." The praise made Clara beam. Samuel had noticed how she responded to encouragement, how starved she'd been for kind words. It made him wonder what her life had been like with Martha Benton, and the wondering always led to anger he had to tamp down. That woman had done her damage and was gone. All Samuel could do now was help Clara heal. On the 10th day, Samuel decided Clara was ready. He led Buttercup to the round pen, saddled her carefully while Clara watched every move, explaining each piece of tack and its purpose. "Now," he said, "first time up, I'm going to lead her while you ride. Just to get you used to the feeling, all right?" Clara nodded eagerly, practically vibrating with excitement. Samuel lifted her up into the saddle. She was so light still despite Maria's best efforts, and adjusted the stirrups as short as they'd go. Even then, Clara's feet barely reached them. "Hold the reins like this," he demonstrated. "Not too tight, just enough to keep contact with her mouth. She's trained to neck rein, which means you lay the rein against her neck to turn her, but for now, just focus on sitting tall and keeping your balance." Samuel clicked his tongue and led Buttercup forward at a slow walk. Clara swayed slightly, then found her balance, gripping the saddle horn with one hand. "I'm riding," she called out, her voice full of wonder. "Mr. Samuel, I'm really riding." "That you are, Miss Clara, that you are." They circled the pen several times, Samuel calling out instructions about posture and balance, Clara absorbing every word. By the end of 30 minutes, she was sitting confidently, no longer clutching the saddle horn, moving with Buttercup's rhythm instead of fighting it. "You're a natural," Samuel told her, and the smile she gave him could have lit up the night sky. That evening, as they sat down to dinner, Clara chattered nonstop about riding, reliving every moment. Maria and Samuel exchanged amused glances over her head, and Samuel felt something he hadn't experienced in a decade, the simple joy of family dinner conversation. "Tomorrow can we go faster?" Clara asked, attacking her roast chicken with enthusiasm. "We'll see. Gotta walk before you can run, little one." "I'm not that little. I'm 8.5. "My apologies. 8.5 is practically grown." Samuel's lips twitched with suppressed amusement. After dinner, they retired to the library, as had become their custom. Samuel would read aloud while Clara curled up in the big leather chair, sometimes following along in her own book, sometimes just listening. Tonight he was reading Treasure Island, doing different voices for the characters. Clara's eyes were wide as he described Long John Silver, and she gasped at all the right moments. When he finally closed the book for the night, Clara looked up at him with an expression so full of contentment that Samuel's chest tightened. "Mr. Samuel?" she said softly. "Yes, Clara? Can I ask you something?" "Of course." She twisted her hands in her lap, suddenly nervous. "Are you going to send me away?" The question hit Samuel like a physical blow. He set the book aside and knelt down beside her chair so they were eye to eye. "Why would you think that?" "Because everyone does. Mama died, then Papa, then Martha left me. Everyone leaves or sends me away. And I thought maybe—" Her voice cracked. "Maybe when you got tired of me, you'd send me away too. Clara, look at me." He waited until her tear-filled eyes met his. "I'm not sending you away. Not now. Not ever. You belong here. This is your home. Promise?" "I promise. Cross my heart." He made an X over his chest, and Clara's lips trembled into a smile. "Can I call you Papa?" The words came out in a rush, as if she'd been holding them in for days. "Miss Maria said I should ask first, that it was polite, but I really want to, if it's okay, if you don't mind." Samuel felt his eyes burning. He thought of his son Thomas, who'd never gotten the chance to call him Papa, who'd barely lived long enough to open his eyes. He thought of all the empty years, all the silence, all the loneliness he'd wrapped around himself like armor. "I'd be honored," he managed, his voice rough. "I'd be honored if you called me Papa." Clara launched herself at him, wrapping her thin arms around his neck. Samuel held her carefully, afraid of holding too tight, afraid of letting go. This small, fierce creature who'd been thrown away like trash had somehow found the one crack in his armor and slipped through. "Papa?" she whispered against his shoulder, testing the word. "Papa." "That's right, sweetheart. I'm your papa now." They stayed like that for a long moment before Clara pulled back, wiping her eyes. "Does this mean Miss Maria is like my mama?" Samuel smiled gently. "Maria loves you very much, but she's not your mother. Your mama was Elizabeth Benton, and she loved you too. We can't replace her, and we shouldn't try. But Maria and I, we'll take care of you. We'll be your family." Clara nodded slowly, processing this. "Okay. Can I still call her Miss Maria?" I think she'd like that. That night, when Samuel tucked Clara into bed, a ritual they'd fallen into naturally, she held his hand and looked up at him with those serious dark eyes. "Papa?" "Yes, sweetheart." "Thank you for finding me. On the prairie. Thank you for not riding away." Samuel's throat tightened. "Thank you for trusting me, for giving an old cowboy a chance to be someone's papa again." He kissed her forehead, something he'd never done before, and Clara's eyes drifted closed with a smile on her lips. As Samuel descended the stairs, he found Maria waiting in the hallway, her expression knowing. "She called you Papa." "She did." "And what did you say?" "I said yes." Maria's eyes glistened. "Bueno. Very good, Señor Samuel, or should I say, Papa Samuel." He laughed, surprising himself. "Just Samuel to you, Maria. Always." "She is healing," Maria said softly. "I see it every day. The fear in her eyes, it grows less. The nightmares come less often. She is beginning to trust that this is real, that we will not abandon her. She still has nightmares? See. Sometimes she cries out in the night. I go to her and she tells me she dreamed Martha came back for her, or that she is alone on the prairie again. But the dreams are becoming less frequent." Samuel's jaw tightened. "If I ever see that woman, you will do nothing, because you are a good man and because Clara needs you here, not in jail for assault." Maria's voice was firm. "The best revenge is Clara's happiness. Let that woman live with what she did. That is punishment enough." 3 weeks after Clara's arrival, Samuel made his monthly trip to town for supplies. He usually went alone, but today Clara begged to come along, and he found he couldn't refuse her. Maria made a list of items she needed, and they set out in the wagon drawn by 2 sturdy horses. The town of Medicine Bow was small but growing, positioned along the railroad line that had been completed a few years earlier. It boasted a general store, a saloon, a church, a small schoolhouse, and various other establishments necessary to frontier life. As Samuel drove the wagon down the main street, he was aware of the curious looks directed at Clara sitting beside him. "Stay close to me," he told her quietly. Town can be overwhelming if you're not used to it. Clara nodded, her eyes wide as she took in the bustle of activity. They tied up outside Harmon's general store, and Samuel helped Clara down from the wagon. Inside, the store smelled of coffee and pickles and new fabric. Mrs. Harmon, a plump woman with kind eyes, looked up from behind the counter. "Mr. Holt, good to see you. And who's this young lady?" Before Samuel could answer, Clara spoke up clearly. "I'm Clara May Benton. I live at the Double H Ranch now." Samuel felt a surge of pride at her confidence. Mrs. Harmon's eyebrows rose slightly, but she smiled warmly. "Well, welcome to Medicine Bow, Clara May. Any friend of Mr. Holt's is a friend of mine." As Samuel went through Maria's list, Clara wandered the store, examining everything with fascination. She lingered by the candy jars, and Samuel noticed. When Mrs. Harmon finished filling his order, he pulled out an extra coin. "Give Miss Clara whatever candy she'd like, within reason." Clara's face lit up. "Really?" "Really. But don't make yourself sick." She chose carefully, settling on peppermint sticks and lemon drops, thanking Mrs. Harmon with perfect manners that made Samuel proud. As they loaded supplies into the wagon, a man Samuel recognized as Chester Whitmore, owner of a neighboring ranch, approached. "Holt, heard you took in a stray." Whitmore's eyes flicked to Clara with something less than kindness. "Indian kid?" Samuel's voice went cold. "She's my daughter, and I'd appreciate you keeping a civil tongue in your head." Whitmore snorted. "Daughter? Come on, Holt. Everyone knows you're a widower with no children. Where'd she really come from?" "That's none of your damn business." Samuel's hand moved to rest on Clara's shoulder, protective and possessive. "Now, if you'll excuse us, we have business to attend to." As they drove away, Clara was quiet. Finally, she spoke in a small voice. "He didn't believe I was your daughter."
Some people are small-minded and rude, pay them no mind. But I'm not really your daughter, not by blood. Samuel pulled the wagon to a stop at the edge of town and turned to face her fully. "Clara, listen to me. Family isn't just about blood. It's about who you choose to love and who chooses to love you back. You're my daughter in every way that matters. Anyone who says different can go to hell." Clara's eyes widened at the profanity, then she giggled. "You said a bad word." "I did. Don't tell Maria." "I won't." She sobered. "But Papa, what if someone tries to take me away? What if the law says I have to go somewhere else?" It was a fear Samuel had been harboring himself, though he'd tried not to show it. "Then we'll deal with it when it happens. But Clara, I promise you, I will fight for you. I will not let anyone take you if I can prevent it." She seemed satisfied with this answer, or at least willing to trust him. They drove home in companionable silence, Clara munching on her peppermints and Samuel thinking about Chester Whitmore's words. The man had a point, even if he'd been rude about it. Samuel had no legal claim to Clara. If someone challenged him, if the territorial authorities got involved, he could lose her. The thought was unbearable. That evening, after Clara had gone to bed, Samuel sat in his study with a whiskey in his thoughts. Maria found him there, brooding. "What troubles you, senor?" "Whitmore made some comments today, about Clara, about my right to keep her." Maria settled into the chair opposite him. "And what did you tell him?" "To mind his own business." "But Maria, he's right. I have no legal claim to her. If Martha Benton came back, or if the Children's Aid Society got involved, they could take her away. Then we must make sure you have a legal claim." "How? I'm a single man. The courts prefer to place children with married couples, families. Even if I petitioned to adopt her, they might refuse." Maria was quiet for a long moment. Then she said carefully, "Then perhaps you should not be a single man." Samuel looked at her sharply. "What are you suggesting?" "I am suggesting that you consider marriage. Not for love necessarily, but for Clara's sake. A marriage of convenience to give you the legal standing to keep her safe." "That's—" Samuel trailed off, unsure how to finish. "Dishonest? Pragmatic? Desperate? Who would agree to such an arrangement?" Maria met his eyes steadily. "I would." The words hung in the air between them. Samuel stared at her, his mind racing. Maria Alvarez had been his housekeeper for over a decade, had seen him through his darkest days, had helped him survive Catherine's death. She was competent, kind, and devoted to Clara already. "You'd marry me?"
For Clara. For Clara, yes, but also for other reasons. Maria's voice was calm, measured. I am not a young woman anymore, Senor Samuel. I have no family, no prospects, no security beyond my position here, and I have grown to care for you both very deeply. This house, it feels like home now. Clara feels like the daughter I lost. If marrying you would protect her, would give her the family she deserves, then yes, I would do it. Maria, I can't ask you to. You are not asking. I am offering. She leaned forward, her expression earnest. I know you do not love me. Not the way you loved Catherine. I am not asking for that. I am offering a partnership, a practical arrangement that benefits us all. You get the legal standing to protect Clara. Clara gets a complete family, and I get. She paused. I get to be part of something good, something that matters. Samuel thought about it, turning the idea over in his mind. It made sense in a cold, practical way, but it also felt wrong somehow, like he'd be using Maria. It wouldn't be fair to you, he said finally. You deserve more than a marriage in name only. What I deserve is irrelevant. What matters is what is best for Clara. Maria's voice softened. Besides, Senor, who says it must remain in name only? We have respect for each other, affection even. We have lived under the same roof for years. Perhaps in time we could build something more. Perhaps, Samuel echoed, not quite able to imagine it. Catherine's memory still hung over him, a ghost he'd never fully laid to rest. Think about it, Maria said, rising. There is no rush. But if trouble comes, if someone threatens to take Clara, we should have a plan. After she left, Samuel sat alone with his whiskey and his thoughts. Marriage. The word felt strange, almost foreign. He'd been married once to Catherine, and it had been a great love story. Passionate, all-consuming, tragic in its ending. The thought of marrying again for reasons of pragmatism rather than passion seemed almost like a betrayal of her memory. But then he thought about Clara's question. Are you going to send me away? He thought about the trust in her eyes when she called him Papa, the way she was slowly healing under their care. If marrying Maria would protect her, would ensure she stayed safe and loved and cared for, wasn't that worth more than his romantic notions? Catherine's voice whispered in his memory, the measure of a man isn't his wealth or his strength, Samuel. It's what he does when someone helpless needs him. Samuel finished his whiskey in one swallow and made his decision. Whatever it took to keep Clara safe, he would do it, even if it meant marrying for convenience rather than love. The next morning, he found Maria in the kitchen and told her he'd thought about her offer. I'll do it, he said simply. If you're certain, if you understand what you're agreeing to, then yes. I'll marry you. Maria's face showed no surprise, only quiet satisfaction. I am certain. When? Let's wait a bit. Make sure Clara is settled. Make sure this is really what we want. If no trouble comes, maybe we don't need to rush into it. Maria nodded. That is wise. But Senor Samuel, start thinking of me as Maria, not Miss Maria. If we are to be married, we should at least use first names, no? Samuel couldn't help but smile. All right, Maria it is. The weeks continued to pass, each one bringing small changes and new routines. Clara's riding improved rapidly, and soon she was trotting Buttercup around the corral without help. Samuel had one of his ranch hands build her a small mounting block so she could saddle Buttercup herself, and the pride on her face the first time she did it independently made his heart swell. Maria taught her to cook, to sew, to keep house, but she also taught her Spanish songs and told her stories from her childhood in Mexico. Clara absorbed it all, her quick mind delighting in learning. Samuel introduced her to his account books, showing her how to track expenses and income. A good rancher needs to know the business side, he explained. It's not just about riding horses and herding cattle. It's about making smart decisions with money. Clara proved surprisingly adept with numbers, catching on quickly to the concepts of profit and loss. So if we sell a steer for $40, but it cost us $20 to raise, we made $20 profit? Exactly right. And if we have 100 steers, that's... Her face scrunched up as she calculated. $2,000 profit? Very good. Though it's rarely that simple, there are other expenses to factor in. But yes, that's the basic idea. One evening, about 6 weeks after Clara's arrival, they had an unexpected visitor. Samuel was sitting on the porch with his after-dinner coffee when a rider approached through the gathering dusk. He tensed, recognizing the uniform of a U.S. Marshal. "Stay inside," he told Clara, who'd been sitting beside him. She scurried into the house, and Samuel stood to greet the visitor. The marshal was a young man, maybe 30, with a serious face. "Mr. Samuel Holt?" "That's me. What can I do for you, Marshal?" "I'm Marshal James Crawford out of Cheyenne. I'm looking for a missing child, reported abandoned on the Oregon Trail about 6 weeks ago. 8-year-old girl, dark hair, last seen in the area. You wouldn't happen to know anything about that?" Samuel's blood ran cold, but he kept his face neutral. "Might. What's your interest?" Children's Aid Society filed a report. They want to make sure the child is safe, place her in proper care. A wagon master named Turnbull reported that a woman traveling with a young girl left the train, claiming the child was sick. Never caught back up. The society wants to make sure the girl's all right. "The girl's fine. She's here." Crawford's eyebrows rose. "Here, on your ranch?" "I found her on the prairie, abandoned, took her in. She's been living here since." Samuel's voice was firm, daring the marshal to challenge him. "I see. Well, I'll need to speak with her, make sure she's being properly cared for." Samuel wanted to refuse, but he knew that would only make things worse. "All right, but you keep a civil tone. She's been through enough." He called into the house, and Clara appeared in the doorway, Maria right behind her. When Clara saw the marshal's uniform, fear flashed across her face. "It's all right, sweetheart," Samuel said gently. "This is Marshal Crawford. He just wants to ask you some questions." Crawford approached slowly, his expression softening when he saw Clara's fear. "Hello, miss. I'm just here to make sure you're okay. Can you tell me your name?" "Clara May Benton." Her voice was small but steady. "And how did you come to be at Mr. Holt's ranch?" "He found me, after Martha left me on the prairie to die." Clara's hand found Samuel's, gripping tight. "He saved me." "This Martha, she was your mother?" "Stepmother. My real mama died, then my papa died on the trail, and Martha didn't want me anymore." Clara's voice trembled slightly. "But I have a papa again now. He's my papa, and this is my home." Crawford looked between Clara and Samuel, his expression thoughtful. "Mr. Holt, might I have a word with you privately?" Samuel squeezed Clara's hand reassuringly. "Go inside with Maria. It's all right." Once they were alone, Crawford spoke bluntly. "The Children's Aid Society will want to place her in an orphanage or with a proper family. She has a family. She has me." "You're a single man." "Not for long. I'm engaged to be married." The lie came easily for Clara's sake. "To my housekeeper, Maria Alvarez. We're just waiting for the circuit judge to come through for the ceremony." Crawford studied him carefully. "That true? Ask Maria yourself if you don't believe me." The marshal considered this. "The girl seems healthy, well-fed, well-dressed, clearly cared for, and she says you're her father now." "I am her father, in every way that matters." Crawford was quiet for a long moment, then he sighed. "Look, Holt, off the record, the orphanages are overflowing. Most of those kids end up as cheap labor on farms or worse. If the girl's happy here, if she's being cared for, I'm not inclined to tear her away from a good situation." Samuel felt hope surge in his chest. "So you'll leave her with me?" "I'll file a report saying I found the child. She's being well cared for by a rancher who plans to legally adopt her once he's married. That should satisfy the society. But Holt, you better actually marry that woman, because if they send someone else to check and you lied to me, I'll come back and haul your ass to jail for lying to a federal marshal." "I'll marry her. You have my word." Crawford nodded and mounted his horse. "Take care of that little girl. She's lucky she found you." As the marshal rode away, Samuel stood on the porch, his heart pounding. He'd just made a promise to a federal officer. There was no backing out now. Maria appeared in the doorway. "I heard," she said simply. "So when is the wedding?" Samuel looked at her, this woman who'd stood by him through everything, who'd offered herself as a solution to keep Clara safe. "As soon as we can arrange it. Maria, are you sure?" "I am sure. For Clara. And perhaps She smiled softly. Perhaps for us too. Who knows what the future holds? That night, Samuel sat Clara down and explained what was going to happen. Maria and I are going to get married, to make us a real family in the eyes of the law, so no one can ever take you away. Clara's eyes went wide. Really? Miss Maria will be my mama? If that's all right with you. Clara thought about it seriously. Will she still teach me to cook? Of course. And you'll still teach me to ride? Always. Then yes, it's all right with me. Clara paused. Papa, does this mean we'll all be together, forever? Samuel pulled her close. That's exactly what it means, sweetheart. Forever. And as he held his daughter, because that's what she was now, truly and completely his daughter, Samuel felt the last of the ice around his heart finally melt away. The morning after Marshal Crawford's visit, Samuel woke with the weight of his promise settling over him like a heavy blanket. He'd told a federal officer he was getting married, and now he had to follow through. Not that he minded. Maria was a good woman, and Clara deserved the protection a complete family would provide. But the reality of it was suddenly very real, very immediate. He found Maria already in the kitchen, kneading bread dough with practiced efficiency. Clara sat at the table practicing her letters, her tongue poking out in concentration as she carefully formed each character. "Morning, Papa," she called cheerfully. "Morning, sweetheart. Maria, can I speak with you? Outside?" Maria wiped her flour-dusted hands on her apron and followed him onto the back porch. The morning was cool, the sun just beginning to burn off the night's chill. In the distance, ranch hands were already at work, and the sound of horses nickering carried on the breeze. "We need to make this official," Samuel said without preamble. "Crawford will file his report, and someone might follow up. We can't wait for the circuit judge. He won't be through for another 2 months. So what do you propose?" "We ride to Cheyenne, find a judge or justice of the peace who can marry us quickly, make it legal before anyone can question it." Maria nodded slowly. "And Clara?" "Comes with us. We'll make it a family trip. She's never seen a real city. It'll be an adventure for her." "When do we leave?" Samuel appreciated that she didn't hesitate, didn't question. "Tomorrow. I'll have Tom handle things here. We'll take the wagon, stay a few days, do this right." "Right," Maria echoed, and something flickered in her eyes that Samuel couldn't quite read. "Yes, we should do this right." When they told Clara over breakfast, her reaction was pure excitement. "A city? A real city with buildings and shops and everything?" "Everything," Samuel confirmed. "And while we're there, Maria and I will get married. Then we'll be a real family, legal and proper." Clara launched herself at Maria, hugging her fiercely. "You're going to be my mama!" Maria's eyes glistened as she held the child. "If you want me to be, mija, I would be honored." "Of course I want you to be. You teach me things and make good food and sing to me when I'm sad. You're already like a mama." Samuel watched them together and felt something shift in his chest. This could work. It wasn't the passionate love he'd shared with Catherine, but it was something solid, something real. Partnership, respect, affection. Maybe that was enough. They spent the rest of the day preparing for the journey. Maria packed clothes and provisions while Samuel handled ranch business, giving Tom Jessup detailed instructions for managing things in his absence. "You're really doing this?" Tom asked, studying his boss with knowing eyes. "Marrying Maria? I am. About damn time. That woman's been devoted to you for years. She deserves better than being just the housekeeper." Samuel frowned. "What do you mean, devoted to me?" Tom gave him a look that suggested Samuel was being deliberately dense. "Boss, anyone with eyes can see how she looks at you. Has for years. She loved Catherine like a sister, and after Catherine died, Maria stayed because of you. Not just for the job." The revelation hit Samuel like a physical blow. He'd been so wrapped up in his own grief, his own pain, that he'd never considered Maria might have feelings for him beyond professional loyalty. Had she loved him all this time while he mourned another woman? "I didn't know," he said quietly. "Well, now you do. Treat her right, boss. She's a good woman, and she's been patient enough for a saint." That evening, as they finished packing, Samuel found himself watching Maria with new eyes. The way she smiled at Clara's chatter, the competent way she moved through the house, the quiet strength she'd always possessed. She'd been there through his darkest days, never demanding, never pushing, just present, solid, real. He caught her alone in the kitchen after Clara had gone to bed. "Maria, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Why did you offer to marry me?" "The real reason." Maria's hand stilled on the dish she was washing. For a long moment, she didn't speak. Then she said quietly, "Because I love her. Clara. She has filled a hole in my heart I did not know was still bleeding. And because—" She turned to face him, her dark eyes steady. "Because I have cared for you for a very long time, Samuel Holt, not as an employer, as a man. I watched you grieve, watched you build walls around your heart, watched you survive but not live, and I waited, because that is what you do when you love someone. You wait." Samuel felt his throat tighten. "Maria, You do not have to say anything. I do not expect declarations of love. I know your heart still belongs to Catherine, and I have made my peace with that. But I also know that people can love more than once, in different ways. I am patient. I can wait longer if I must." "You shouldn't have to wait. You deserve someone who loves you completely." "I want you. Even if you cannot love me the way you loved her, I want this life, this family. Is that so wrong?" Samuel crossed to her and took her hands in his. They were work-roughened, strong hands, capable hands. "It's not wrong. And Maria, I may not love you the way I loved Catherine, but I do care for you, deeply. You've been my anchor for 10 years. You've kept me sane, kept me human. That means something." "It means enough," Maria said softly. "For now, it means enough." They left early the next morning, the wagon loaded with supplies and Clara bouncing with excitement on the bench seat between Samuel and Maria. The journey to Cheyenne would take 2 days of steady travel, and Samuel had planned their route to include an overnight stop at a way station he knew. As they rolled across the prairie, Clara peppered them with questions about the city, about the wedding, about everything. Samuel found himself relaxing into the rhythm of the journey, Maria's presence beside him comfortable and familiar. They made good time, stopping at midday to rest the horses and eat the lunch Maria had packed. Clara ran around stretching her legs, exploring the tall grass and chasing grasshoppers, while Samuel and Maria sat in the wagon's shade. "Are you nervous?" Maria asked. "About getting married?" "A little." "About doing right by Clara?" "More than a little." "You are already doing right by her. She is thriving, Samuel. Surely you see that." He did see it. The difference between the terrified, half-starved child he'd found on the prairie and the laughing girl chasing insects was like night and day. She's a remarkable kid. Brave, smart, resilient. She had to be, to survive what she survived. But now she can be more than just a survivor. She can be a child again, with parents who love her. They reached the way station by evening, a rough but clean establishment run by a widow named Mrs. Garrett. She had 2 rooms available, and Maria took Clara to one while Samuel settled into the other. At dinner, Mrs. Garrett made conversation, her curiosity about their little family evident but politely restrained. "Heading to Cheyenne?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am," Samuel confirmed. "Getting married." Mrs. Garrett beamed at them. "How wonderful! And this little one is yours?" "She is," Maria said firmly, her arm around Clara. "Our daughter." Clara glowed at the words, and Samuel felt that now familiar warmth in his chest. Our daughter. It was true in every way that mattered. That night, lying in his narrow bed, Samuel thought about what was coming. Marriage, family, a life he'd never expected to have again. He thought about Catherine, about the love they'd shared, and silently asked her blessing. He liked to think she'd approve, that she'd want him to be happy, to give Clara the family she deserved. They reached Cheyenne late the next afternoon. The city was a revelation to Clara, who pressed against Samuel's side as they drove down the bustling main street. Buildings rose 2 and 3 stories high, painted and proper. People crowded the wooden sidewalks. Signs advertised everything from dry goods to legal services to medical care. "It's so big," Clara breathed. "So many people." "Wait until you see Denver," Samuel said with a smile. "Makes Cheyenne look like a village." They checked into the Inner Ocean Hotel, a respectable establishment that didn't bat an eye at their request for 2 adjoining rooms. Once settled, Samuel went in search of someone who could perform a marriage ceremony quickly. A helpful clerk at the courthouse directed him to Judge Franklin Wheeler, who maintained offices on the second floor. Judge Wheeler was a portly man in his 60s with shrewd eyes and a kind smile. He listened to Samuel's request without interruption, then leaned back in his chair. "You want to get married tomorrow?" "Yes, sir. Is that possible?" "It's possible." "Unusual, but possible." "Might I ask the reason for the rush?" Samuel considered lying, then decided against it. Something about Wheeler's demeanor suggested he'd appreciate honesty. "I've taken in a child, Your Honor, an orphan I found abandoned on the prairie. The marshal came by, and the Children's Aid Society is interested. I told him I was engaged to be married, which makes me a more suitable guardian. Now I need to make that true before someone comes to check." Wheeler's eyebrows rose. "So this is a marriage of convenience? For the child's sake?" "It started that way," Samuel admitted. "But Maria, my intended, she's been my housekeeper for 10 years. She's a good woman, and she loves the child. We both do. This might have started as a practical arrangement, but it's more than that now." "And does this woman know you're marrying her primarily to keep custody of a child?" "It was her idea, Your Honor. She offered herself as a solution. She loves the girl like her own." Wheeler studied him for a long moment. "Mr. Holt, I've been a judge for 30 years. I've seen all kinds of marriages. Love matches that ended in murder, arranged marriages that grew into deep partnerships, everything in between. The law cares about legality, but I care about intention. Tell me true. Will you be a good husband to this woman? Will you honor and respect her?" "I will." "Will you provide for the child, keep her safe, give her a good home?" "With my life." Wheeler nodded slowly. "Then I'll marry you tomorrow afternoon, 2 o'clock, here in my chambers. Bring your lady and the child. And Mr. Holt, try to build something real with this woman. Life's too short for half measures." Samuel returned to the hotel feeling lighter than he had in days. He found Maria and Clara in their room, Clara wearing a new dress Maria had purchased from a shop downstairs. "Look, Papa!" Clara spun in a circle, the blue cotton swirling around her legs. "Miss Maria bought it for tomorrow, for the wedding." "You look beautiful, sweetheart." He turned to Maria. "Did you get something for yourself?" "I have my Sunday dress. It will be fine. Humor me. Buy yourself something new, a wedding dress, or as close as you can find, please." Maria looked surprised, then pleased. "You do not have to." "I want to. You deserve to feel special tomorrow." After Clara was asleep that night, Samuel and Maria sat in the hotel's small lobby, sharing coffee and watching the street outside. The city was still alive with activity, even after dark, saloons spilling light and noise onto the boardwalks. "Are you having second thoughts?" Maria asked quietly. "No. Are you?" "No. I simply wanted to be certain you were not feeling pressured." "Maria, if anything, I'm grateful. You're giving Clara security, giving us both a family. That's not nothing. It is also not a love match. I want to be clear about expectations, Samuel. I do not expect you to suddenly fall madly in love with me, but I hope we can build something good together. Partnership, respect, perhaps affection. We have affection already. The rest will come, or it won't. Either way, we'll make this work. For Clara." "For Clara," Maria agreed, "and perhaps in time for us too." The next morning dawned clear and beautiful. Maria disappeared early to pick up the dress she'd ordered, leaving Samuel to take Clara to breakfast. They found a small restaurant near the hotel, and Clara attacked her pancakes with enthusiasm. "Papa, are you nervous about marrying Miss Maria?" "A little. It's a big step." "But you like her, right? You're not just doing this for me?" Samuel reached across to squeeze her hand. "I'm doing it partly for you, yes, but also because Maria is a wonderful woman who deserves to be more than just a housekeeper. She deserves to be part of our family, official and proper. Does that make sense?" Clara nodded seriously. "I think so. Like how I'm your daughter because you chose me, not because we have the same blood. You're choosing Miss Maria too." "Exactly right. You're a smart kid. You know that?" "Papa says I'm the smartest kid in Wyoming." "Papa's right." They returned to the hotel to find Maria had returned, carrying a wrapped package. She shooed them out, insisting she needed time to prepare.
Samuel and Clara wandered the town, stopping at a jewelry shop where Samuel purchased simple gold bands for himself and Maria, and a delicate silver locket for Clara. "What's this for?" Clara asked as he fastened it around her neck.
"Because today you officially become Clara May Holt, daughter of Samuel and Maria Holt. That's worth celebrating." Clara opened the locket to find it empty. "There's no picture inside." "We'll fix that. We'll get a family photograph taken, and we'll put it right there. Then you'll always have us with you, no matter what." Tears welled in Clara's eyes. "Promise I'll always be yours? Even when I'm grown up?" "Always. That's what family means, sweetheart. Forever." At 2 o'clock, they climbed the stairs to Judge Wheeler's chambers. Samuel wore his best suit, brushed clean of trail dust. Clara clutched a small bouquet of wildflowers they'd picked that morning. And when Maria emerged from the ladies' powder room, Samuel felt his breath catch. She wore a dove-gray dress with delicate lace at the collar and cuffs. Her usually severe hair softened into waves around her face. She'd never looked more beautiful, and Samuel was struck by the realization that he'd been taking her for granted for years. This woman who'd stood by him, who'd held his household together, who'd offered herself as a solution to keep Clara safe, she deserved to be seen. "Maria," he said softly, "you look lovely." A blush crept up her cheeks. "Thank you." Judge Wheeler's chambers were simple but dignified, with law books lining the walls and afternoon sunlight streaming through tall windows. Wheeler himself stood before them in his judicial robes, looking every inch the authority figure he was. "Before we begin," he said, "I want to speak to young Clara. Come here, child." Clara approached nervously, and Wheeler knelt down to her level. "Clara, do you understand what's happening today?" "Yes, sir. Papa and Miss Maria are getting married so we can be a real family. And is that what you want, to be their daughter?" "More than anything." Clara's voice was fervent. "They saved me. They love me. They're my family." Wheeler nodded, satisfied. "Then let's make it official." He stood and gestured for Samuel and Maria to stand before him, Clara between them. The ceremony was brief but meaningful. Wheeler spoke about the sanctity of marriage, about the responsibilities they were undertaking not just to each other, but to the child in their care. When he asked if they would honor and cherish each other, both Samuel and Maria answered clearly, their voices steady. Samuel slipped the gold band onto Maria's finger, noting how her hand trembled slightly. When she placed the ring on his finger in turn, their eyes met, and Samuel saw in her face not just hope, but a fierce determination. She would make this work. They both would. "By the power vested in me by the territory of Wyoming, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Mr. Holt, you may kiss your bride." Samuel hesitated for just a moment, then leaned in and kissed Maria gently. It was chaste, respectful, but there was warmth in it, a promise of possibility. Clara cheered, breaking the solemnity of the moment, and they all laughed. Wheeler produced the marriage certificate, and they signed it formally, Clara watching with wide eyes as her future was made secure with ink and paper. "Congratulations, Mr. and Mrs. Holt," Wheeler said warmly, "and young Miss Holt. May you build a good life together." As they emerged from the courthouse into the bright afternoon, Samuel felt something he hadn't expected. Genuine happiness. Not the passionate, all-consuming joy he'd felt with Catherine, but something steadier, deeper. The satisfaction of having done right by the people who mattered. "Mrs. Holt," he said to Maria, testing the name. She smiled. "It will take some getting used to. We have time, all the time in the world." They celebrated with dinner at Cheyenne's finest restaurant, Clara wide-eyed at the elegant surroundings and multiple courses. She tried oysters for the first time and declared them slimy but interesting. Samuel and Maria shared amused glances across the table, the awkwardness of new marriage beginning to ease into something more comfortable. That night, back at the hotel, there was a moment of awkwardness as they stood in the hallway between their adjoining rooms. They were married now, legally and officially. The expectations had changed. "I'll take the other room," Samuel said quietly, not wanting to presume. "Unless, perhaps we take things slowly," Maria said, her cheeks flushed. "We have Clara to think about, and we are both tired from the journey and the emotions of the day. But Samuel, thank you for treating this seriously.
for giving me a real wedding, a real ceremony. It mattered. You deserved it. You deserve more than I've given you. Then give it to me in time. We have the rest of our lives to figure this out." She kissed his cheek, then slipped into her room where Clara was already asleep. Samuel stood in the hallway for a moment, touching his wedding ring with wonder. He was married. He had a daughter. He had a family again. The journey back to the ranch was lighter somehow, filled with Clara's chatter and plans for the future. She wanted to learn to rope cattle, to help with the spring roundup, to read every book in the library twice. Samuel and Maria listened indulgently, occasionally exchanging glances that spoke of shared affection for this child they'd both chosen to love. When they crested the final rise and saw the Double H spread before them, Clara shouted with joy, "We're home! Home!" The word resonated in Samuel's chest. For 10 years, the ranch had been a place he existed, nothing more. Now, with Maria beside him and Clara bouncing excitedly on the bench seat, it felt like home again. The house wouldn't be empty anymore. The silence wouldn't be oppressive. Life had returned to these walls. Tom Jessup met them in the yard, his weathered face breaking into a rare grin when he saw the rings on their hands. "You actually did it. Congratulations, boss. Mrs. Holt." He tipped his hat to Maria. "And Miss Clara Holt, I hear. Welcome home, all of you." The ranch hands had clearly been informed because they'd hung a makeshift banner over the barn door. "Congratulations, Holt family." Clara squealed with delight, and even Maria's eyes grew misty at the gesture. That evening, after Clara was asleep in her room, their room, in the house that was now legally their family home, Samuel found Maria on the back porch, staring out at the darkening prairie. "Thinking about something?" he asked, joining her. "About how much can change in 2 months. When you brought Clara home, I never imagined." She trailed off, smiling. "But I'm glad, for all of it." "So am I." Samuel took her hand, the one with the gold band. "Maria, I know this started as a practical arrangement, but I want you to know I'm going to try to be a good husband, to build something real with you. That is all I ask, time and effort. The rest will come or it will not, but we will face it together." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge one by one over the Wyoming sky. Somewhere in the house, Clara slept safely, dreaming of horses and books and family. And Samuel Holt, the wealthiest rancher in 3 counties, finally felt like the richest man alive. The first challenge to their new family arrangement came exactly 2 weeks after they returned from Cheyenne. Samuel was working with the horses in the main corral when Tom Jessup came running from the house, his expression dark as a thundercloud. "Boss, you better come quick. There's trouble." Samuel's blood ran cold. "Clara?" "She's fine. She's with Maria. But there's people at the front door and they ain't friendly. Woman with a badge and a hard-looking man. They're asking for the orphan girl." Samuel didn't run. Running would show fear, and he couldn't afford to show weakness now. But he walked fast, his jaw set and his hands clenched at his sides. When he reached the front porch, he found Maria standing in the doorway like a sentinel, Clara clutched protectively against her side. A stern-faced woman in a severe black dress stood on the bottom porch step, a leather portfolio under her arm. Beside her was a large man with cold eyes and a deputy's badge pinned to his vest. The woman spoke first, her voice clipped and officious. "Mr. Samuel Holt? That's me. I'm Miss Harriet Wilkes from the Children's Aid Society. This is Deputy Frank Garrison. We're here regarding the minor child Clara May Benton, who we understand is residing on these premises." Samuel felt Maria tense beside him. "Clara May Holt," he corrected, his voice hard. "My daughter. And yes, she lives here. This is her home." Miss Wilkes's lips thinned. "Mr. Holt, the Society has been conducting an investigation into the circumstances of this child's placement. We have some concerns." "What kind of concerns?" "For starters, there's no legal adoption paperwork on file with the territory. Second, we've received information that you are an unmarried man living alone with a young girl, a situation that is at best highly irregular and at worst potentially dangerous for the child." Samuel's fury ignited, but he kept his voice level. "Your information is out of date, Miss Wilkes. I got married 2 weeks ago. To my wife, Maria."
He gestured to Maria, who lifted her left hand to display her wedding ring. Miss Wilkes faltered, but only for a moment. Even so, the lack of formal adoption proceedings is troubling. The society has a responsibility to ensure that children are placed in appropriate homes through proper channels. You found this child and simply kept her, without notifying the authorities? I notified Marshal Crawford. He came, he investigated, he approved. Marshal Crawford exceeded his authority. Placement of orphaned children falls under the purview of the society, not local law enforcement. Miss Wilkes consulted her portfolio. Furthermore, we've received a petition from Mrs. Martha Blake, the child's legal stepmother, requesting that Clara be returned to her custody. The name hit Samuel like a fist. Martha, the woman who'd abandoned Clara to die, was now claiming she wanted her back? Clara made a small, terrified sound and pressed harder against Maria. "No," she whispered. "No, no, no. Papa, don't let them take me. Please don't let them take me." Samuel moved to stand in front of his wife and daughter, his body a barrier between them and the intruders. That woman forfeited any right to Clara when she left her on the prairie to die. I have a statement from Clara herself describing what happened. Martha Benton abandoned her own stepdaughter. She should be arrested, not rewarded with custody. "Mrs. Blake claims the child ran away," Miss Wilkes countered, "that she was a difficult, disobedient girl who fled during a stop on the trail. Mrs. Blake and her new husband have been searching for her ever since." "That's a damn lie!" The words burst from Clara, shocking everyone. "She told me to get out. She said I was dead weight. She drove away and left me with nothing." "Clara," Maria said softly, her hand on the girl's shoulder, "let Papa handle this." But Clara shook her head fiercely, tears streaming down her face. "No, they can't take me back to her. She hit me. She starved me. She hated me. I'll die before I go back." Miss Wilkes's expression softened slightly at Clara's obvious terror, but her voice remained firm. "Child, I understand you've formed an attachment to Mr. Holt, but the law is clear. Blood relatives have first claim, and Mrs. Blake is your legal guardian as your late father's widow." "Over my dead body," Samuel said quietly, and there was something in his voice that made Deputy Garrison's hand drift toward his gun. "You want my daughter, you'll have to go through me. And Miss Wilkes, I strongly suggest you investigate Martha Blake before you hand any child over to her. Talk to the wagon master who expelled her from the train. Talk to the other families who traveled with them. They'll tell you what kind of woman she is." "Mr. Holt, threats will not help your case. That wasn't a threat. That was a promise. Clara is my daughter, legally adopted through common law rights and sealed by my marriage. She bears my name now. This is her home. And if you try to take her, I will fight you with every legal resource I have. I'll take this to the territorial governor if I must. I'll take it to Washington, D.C., but you will not take my child." Miss Wilkes stared at him, clearly not accustomed to such resistance. "Mr. Holt, I'm trying to do what's best for the child, then do it by protecting her from the woman who tried to kill her, not by handing her back to her abuser." The standoff stretched taut as a wire. Deputy Garrison looked uncomfortable, his hand still near his weapon. Miss Wilkes's face was unreadable, but Samuel could see the calculation in her eyes. She'd come expecting an easy retrieval. Instead, she'd found a family prepared to fight. Finally, she spoke. "I will need to conduct interviews with the child, with you, with Mrs. Holt. I will need to inspect the home, review your finances, and verify the circumstances of your marriage." "Fine. Interview whoever you want. But Clara stays here while you do it. She doesn't leave this property." "Mr. Holt, not negotiable. You want to investigate, investigate. But my daughter sleeps in her own bed, in her own home, until you can legally prove, that she shouldn't. Can you do that, Miss Wilkes? Can you show me paperwork signed by a judge that gives you the right to remove her?" Miss Wilkes's silence was answer enough. "I'll return tomorrow to begin the interviews. Deputy Garrison will remain here to ensure the child isn't moved or hidden." "The hell he will," Maria said, her voice sharp. This was the first time she'd spoken, and everyone turned to look at her. "You will not put an armed man in my home to intimidate my family. If you want supervision, I'm sure Judge Wheeler in Cheyenne would be happy to appoint someone appropriate. But this man," she gestured at Garrison, "does not stay." Miss Wilkes opened her mouth to argue, then seemed to think better of it. "Very well, but I'm posting a man in town. If the child disappears, Mr. Holt, I'll have you arrested for kidnapping. Do we understand each other?" "Perfectly." They left, and Samuel watched until they disappeared down the road. Only then did he allow himself to shake. Maria took his arm, steadying him while Clara sobbed against his chest. "Papa, don't let her take me back. Please, Papa. I can't go back." "You won't. I promise you, sweetheart. I will not let that happen." Samuel looked at Maria over Clara's head and saw his own fear reflected in her eyes. They'd won this battle, but the war was far from over. That night, Clara refused to sleep in her own room. She clung to Maria with a desperation that broke Samuel's heart, terrified that if she closed her eyes, she'd wake up to find herself back with Martha. Eventually, Maria made up a pallet on the floor of their bedroom, and Clara curled up there with her ragged doll, finally drifting into an exhausted sleep. Samuel stood at the window, staring out at the dark prairie, his mind racing. They needed help, real help, and they needed it fast. Miss Wilkes would return tomorrow, and behind her stood Martha Blake with her lies and her legal claim. The thought of that woman getting her hands on Clara again made Samuel's blood boil. "We need a lawyer," Maria said quietly from where she sat on the edge of the bed, keeping watch over Clara. "A good one. Someone who understands territorial law and can fight for us. I know a man in Cheyenne, Bartholomew Preston. He handled some land disputes for me years ago. He's sharp, doesn't back down from a fight." Samuel turned from the window. "I'll ride out at first light. Bring him back with me. Will you be all right here alone?" "Tom and the ranch hands will be here, and I have my shotgun." Maria's voice was steel. "Anyone tries to take Clara while you're gone, they'll regret it." Samuel crossed to her and took her hand. "Thank you for fighting for her, for standing with me on this. She is our daughter. I would die before letting that monster have her back." Maria looked up at him, her dark eyes fierce in the lamplight. "Go to Cheyenne. Bring this lawyer. We will be here when you return." Samuel left before dawn, pushing midnight hard. The stallion seemed to sense his urgency, eating up the miles with ground-covering strides. By mid-morning, Samuel was pounding on the door of Bartholomew Preston's office in Cheyenne. Preston was a tall, thin man with steel-gray hair and the sharp eyes of a predator. He listened without interruption as Samuel laid out the situation, his expression growing darker with each detail. "So this woman abandoned the child, then married some opportunist who sees a payday in reclaiming her," Preston summarized when Samuel finished. "And the Children's Aid Society is considering returning Clara to her custody? That's the situation. Can you help us?" Preston leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. "I can, but Holt, I need to be straight with you. This will be a fight. Blood relatives do have preference in territorial law, and as the widow of Clara's father, Martha Blake has a legal claim. However," he held up a hand as Samuel started to protest, "abandonment negates that claim. If we can prove abandonment and prove Clara is better off with you, we can win this. What do we need?" "Witnesses. Anyone who saw Martha's treatment of Clara on the trail. The wagon master's testimony would be particularly valuable. Medical evidence of abuse. Clara's own testimony, though that's tricky. Judges don't always credit children's words heavily. And we need to establish that you and your wife can provide a stable, loving home." Preston stood. "Let me gather some files and we'll head to your ranch. I want to interview everyone, document everything. Miss Wilkes will be back today?" "That's what she said." "Good. Let her conduct her interviews. We'll conduct our own investigation simultaneously, and we'll see whose case is stronger." They made the return journey in record time, arriving at the Double H just after noon. Samuel's heart eased when he saw Clara in the yard, helping Maria hang laundry. She was safe. They were both safe. For now. Preston set up a makeshift office in Samuel's study and began his work with methodical precision. He interviewed Clara first, gently coaxing from her every detail of life with Martha. The beatings, the starvation, the cruel words. Clara's testimony was damning, and Preston documented it all carefully. "You're a brave girl," he told her when they finished. "What you've told me today might save your life. Do you understand that?" Clara nodded solemnly. "I just want to stay with Papa and Mama Maria. They love me. They make me feel safe." Next, Preston interviewed Maria, who described Clara's condition when she'd first arrived. Malnourished, bruised, traumatized. Then Samuel, who recounted finding Clara abandoned on the prairie. By the time Preston finished with the household, Miss Wilkes arrived for her own interviews, accompanied by a different deputy and looking decidedly less confident than she had the day before. "Mr. Holt, I see you've retained counsel. Miss Wilkes, this is Bartholomew Preston, my attorney. He'll be present for any interviews you conduct." Wilkes's lips pressed into a thin line, but she nodded. "Very well. Let's proceed." The interviews were tense, with Preston objecting frequently to Wilkes's more leading questions. But as the afternoon wore on, Samuel noticed something shifting in Wilkes's demeanor. The woman was smart enough to see the evidence piling up against Martha Blake's claims. Clara's terror was too real to be fabricated. The home was clearly loving and stable. And Preston's pointed questions about the society's due diligence in investigating Blake's claims made Wilkes visibly uncomfortable. "Miss Wilkes," Preston said when they finished, "I assume you've obtained statements from members of the wagon train, verified Mrs. Blake's version of events?" The society's resources are limited. Mrs. Blake provided a sworn statement. A statement contradicted by the child, by Mr. Holt, who found her abandoned, and I suspect by anyone else who was on that trail. I suggest you locate Wagon Master Horace Turnbull before proceeding further. His testimony will be crucial. Wilkes left looking troubled, promising to return in 3 days with a decision. Those 3 days felt like 3 years to Samuel. They went through the motions of daily life, ranch work, lessons, meals, but tension hung over everything like a storm cloud. On the second day, Tom Jessup rode in from town with news. "Boss, there's a couple in Medicine Bow asking questions about Clara. Man and woman. The man fits the description of Cyrus Blake that Miss Wilkes mentioned." Samuel's blood ran cold. "Martha's here?" "Looks that way, staying at the boarding house, making noise about her rights as a stepmother. Some folks are sympathetic, but Mrs. Harmon at the general store shut her down pretty quick. Told her any woman who'd abandon a child deserved to hang. Good for Mrs. Harmon." Samuel looked at Preston, who'd stayed at the ranch to prepare their case. "They'll come here eventually." "Let them," Preston said grimly. "I'd like to depose Mrs. Blake personally." Nothing like watching someone lie under oath to destroy their credibility. They didn't have to wait long. The next morning, a hired wagon rolled up the drive carrying Martha Blake and a man Samuel assumed was her new husband, Cyrus. Martha had changed since Clara last saw her, better fed, better dressed, with the look of someone who'd come into money. Cyrus Blake was a hard-faced man with calculating eyes and a gun belt that suggested he was more than comfortable with violence. Samuel met them on the porch, Preston beside him. Maria had taken Clara inside, barricading the door. Samuel could see ranch hands strategically positioned around the yard, rifles within easy reach. Tom Jessup stood near the barn, his hand resting casually on his gun. "Mr. Holt?" Martha's voice was syrupy sweet, nothing like the harsh tone Clara had described. "I'm Martha Blake. I believe you have my stepdaughter?" "I have my daughter, Clara May Holt. What I don't have is any interest in speaking with you." Martha's smile didn't waver. "Now, Mr. Holt, I understand there's been some confusion. Clara ran away while we were traveling, and I've been searching for her ever since. I'm so grateful you kept her safe, but it's time for her to come home with me now." "She is home." "Mr. Holt, I'm Clara's legal guardian. Her father entrusted her to my care before he died. The law is on my side." Preston stepped forward. "Mrs. Blake, I'm Mr. Holt's attorney. I'd be interested to hear your account of how Clara came to be separated from you, under oath, of course." Something flickered in Martha's eyes, fear, calculation, anger. "I don't need to explain anything to you. That girl is mine by law, and I want her returned." "That girl has a name," Samuel said quietly, his rage barely controlled, "and she's not yours. You forfeited any claim to her when you drove away and left her to die on the prairie. That's a lie. She ran off. Prove it. Provide one witness who saw her run. One piece of evidence that supports your story. Because I have plenty of evidence that proves mine. I have Clara's testimony. I have my own witness account of finding her abandoned. And I will track down every person on that wagon train who saw how you treated her." Cyrus Blake spoke for the first time, his voice a low growl. "You calling my wife a liar?" I'm calling her a child abuser and attempted murderer. If that makes her a liar too, so be it. Cyrus's hand moved toward his gun, but suddenly the yard was full of motion. Tom and the ranch hands raised their rifles in perfect synchronization, every barrel trained on Cyrus. The man froze, his hand hovering over his weapon. I wouldn't, Tom said conversationally. You're outnumbered, outgunned, and on private property. Pull that weapon and you won't live to regret it. This ain't over, Cyrus snarled. We got legal rights. Then pursue them legally, Preston interrupted. Through the courts, with evidence and testimony. But if you set foot on this property again without a court order, you'll be arrested for trespassing. And if you threaten Mr. Holt or his family again, I'll personally ensure you're charged with assault. Are we clear? Martha's composure cracked. That girl owes me. Her father's death left me with nothing. No money, no prospects, nothing. The least she can do is earn her keep. The admission hung in the air like a death knell. Preston smiled slowly. Thank you, Mrs. Blake. That statement will be very useful in court. Martha's face went white as she realized what she'd said. Cyrus grabbed her arm and hauled her back toward the wagon. Shut up, woman. You've said enough. They left in a cloud of dust and fury, but Samuel knew they'd be back. People that desperate, that determined, didn't give up easily. Inside the house, Samuel found Clara pressed against Maria's side, trembling. Is she gone? She's gone, sweetheart, and she won't get you, I promise. She sounded different, nicer, but I heard what she said at the end, about me earning my keep. Clara looked up at him with ancient eyes. She wants to use me, doesn't she? Like those kids who get sent to work in factories or farms? Preston had followed them inside, and he knelt before Clara. Miss Clara, that's exactly what she wants. But it's not going to happen. What she said out there? That destroyed any claim she had to you. A judge will never return a child to someone who admitted they only want her for labor. So I can stay? Really stay? Really stay. But we still have to go through the legal process, make it official. Can you be brave a little longer? Clara nodded, squaring her thin shoulders. I can be brave. I've been brave before. 3 days later, they received word that Miss Wilkes had returned to town and wanted to meet at the courthouse. Judge Wheeler had agreed to hear the case immediately, given the circumstances. Samuel, Maria, Clara, and Preston made the journey together, tension riding with them every mile. The courthouse was packed. Word had spread about the case, and apparently the whole territory had opinions. Mrs. Harmon from the general store was there, as was the minister from the church, several ranch hands from the Double H, and more townspeople than Samuel could count. Martha and Cyrus Blake sat on one side of the courtroom, looking significantly less confident than they had at the ranch. Judge Wheeler called the court to order, his expression grave. This is a hearing to determine custody of the minor child Clara May Benton, also known as Clara May Holt. I've reviewed the preliminary statements and evidence. Miss Wilkes, you wish to address the court? Wilkes stood, and to Samuel's surprise, she didn't argue for Martha's claim. Your Honor, after conducting a thorough investigation, the Children's Aid Society withdraws its support for Mrs. Blake's petition. We've obtained testimony from Wagon Master Horace Turnbull, who confirmed that Mrs. Blake claimed the child was ill, as a pretense to separate from the wagon train. We've also spoken with 3 families who traveled with them, all of whom reported witnessing Mrs. Blake's verbal and physical abuse of the child. Furthermore, Mrs. Blake's own statements to Mr. Holt and his attorney suggest her interest in the child is financial rather than maternal. Martha jumped to her feet. That's not true. I love Clara. I've been searching for her. Mrs. Blake, you'll have your chance to speak, Wheeler said sternly. Sit down. Preston stood. Your Honor, I'd like to call Clara May Holt to testify. Clara walked to the witness stand with Maria beside her for support. Preston questioned her gently, letting her tell her story in her own words. The courtroom was utterly silent as Clara described life with Martha, the beatings, the starvation, the day Martha drove away and left her on the prairie. Clara, Preston asked softly, if the court returned you to Mrs. Blake, what would happen? I'd die, Clara said simply. Maybe not right away, but eventually. She doesn't want me. She never did. She'd work me until I broke or she'd abandon me again. I know it. And if you stayed with Samuel and Maria Holt? Clara's face transformed, lit from within. Then I'd have a family. I'd have parents who love me and want me. I'd have a home where I'm safe. I'd have a future. She looked directly at Judge Wheeler. Please, sir, please let me stay with my papa and mama. They chose me when no one else wanted me. That means something, doesn't it? Wheeler's eyes were suspiciously bright. It means everything, child. Mr. Preston, call your next witness. Samuel testified about finding Clara, about the state she was in, about the home they'd built together. Maria spoke about Clara's progress, her intelligence, her resilience. Tom Jessup described the day Clara arrived and the transformation he'd witnessed. Even Mrs. Harmon testified about seeing Clara in town, noting how healthy and happy she appeared. Finally, Preston called Martha Blake to the stand. Under oath, Martha's story fell apart. Preston picked it apart with surgical precision, highlighting contradictions, pressing on inconsistencies. When he asked directly if she'd abandoned Clara, Martha tried to maintain her lies, but her earlier admission to Samuel haunted her. Mrs. Blake, you told Mr. Holt, and I quote, "That girl owes me. The least she can do is earn her keep. Is that correct?" Martha's lawyer objected, but Preston had witnesses. Tom Jessup and 2 ranch hands had heard the statement. Martha's face flushed with anger and humiliation. I was upset. I didn't mean... You meant exactly what you said. You see Clara as a commodity, a source of labor or profit, not as a child who needs love and protection. That's not... Martha's composure shattered completely. Fine. Yes, I left her. She was eating my food, using my supplies, and giving me nothing in return. Her father died and left me with nothing but debts and his brat. What was I supposed to do? The courtroom erupted. Wheeler had to bang his gavel repeatedly to restore order. Martha seemed to realize what she'd admitted and collapsed in her chair, sobbing. Cyrus Blake looked like he wanted to disappear. I've heard enough, Wheeler said when order was restored. Mrs. Blake, your admission of abandonment is appalling. You left a vulnerable child to die in the wilderness because you viewed her as a financial burden. That alone disqualifies you from custody. But your subsequent attempt to reclaim her for financial exploitation makes you unfit to be near any child, let alone one you've already abused. Your Honor, Martha's lawyer tried to intervene, but Wheeler cut him off. I'm not finished. Mr. Holt, Mrs. Holt approached the bench. Samuel and Maria stood together, Samuel's arm around his wife's waist. Wheeler looked at them thoughtfully. I've presided over a lot of custody cases in my years on the bench. I've seen children treated as property, as servants, as inconveniences. What I haven't seen often enough is what I see here. 2 people who chose a child not for what she could do for them, but simply because she needed them. You've provided Clara with a loving home, stability, education, and most importantly, safety. Your marriage may have started as a practical arrangement, but anyone with eyes can see it's become something real. You're a family in the truest sense. He picked up his gavel. Therefore, I'm terminating all parental rights of Martha Blake regarding the minor child Clara May Benton. Furthermore, I'm granting full adoption rights to Samuel and Maria Holt. Clara May Holt is legally and permanently their daughter. This decision is final and binding. The gavel came down with a crack that echoed through the courthouse. For a moment, there was absolute silence. Then the room exploded with applause and cheers. Clara burst into tears and ran to Samuel and Maria, who caught her in their arms and held her tight. Is it real? Clara sobbed. Is it really over? She can't take me back? It's real, sweetheart, Samuel said, his own voice choked with emotion. You're ours. Forever. Legally, officially, completely ours. Martha Blake was still sobbing at her table, but Samuel felt no pity for her. She'd made her choices, and now she'd live with the consequences. Wheeler was already instructing the bailiff to ensure the Blakes left town and stayed away from the Holts. Outside the courthouse, well-wishers surrounded them. Mrs. Harmon pressed a bag of candy into Clara's hands. The minister offered his congratulations. Even Miss Wilkes approached, looking contrite. Mr. Holt, I apologize for how this began. The society tries to protect children, but sometimes we get it wrong. I'm glad we got it right in the end. So am I, Miss Wilkes. So am I. The journey home was joyous, Clara chattering nonstop about being officially adopted, about her name being Clara May Holt forever and ever. When they crested the final rise and saw the double H spread before them, Samuel felt something settle in his chest. This was home. This was family. This was everything he thought he'd lost forever. That night, after Clara was asleep, Samuel found Maria on the back porch, where she so often went to think. He joined her, taking her hand in his. "Thank you," he said simply. "For what?" "For offering to marry me. For loving Clara. For fighting for our family. For being exactly who you are." Maria smiled, squeezing his hand. "You don't need to thank me for loving them. It was the easiest thing I've ever done." "Them?" "Clara. And you." She turned to face him fully. "I know this marriage began as a practical arrangement, Samuel, but somewhere along the way it became real for me. You don't have to feel the same." Samuel kissed her, cutting off her words. It was deeper than their first kiss, full of promise and possibility. When he pulled back, Maria's eyes were wide. "I do feel the same," he said quietly. "It snuck up on me, but it's there. Respect, affection, maybe even love. Catherine will always be part of my past, but Maria, you're my future. You and Clara both." Tears spilled down Maria's cheeks, but she was smiling. "Then we are truly a family, in every way." "In every way," Samuel agreed. The years that followed were good ones. Clara grew from a frightened 8-year-old into a confident young woman, educated and capable. She did learn to rope cattle, did help with the spring roundups, and did read every book in the library twice. She also developed a gift for working with horses, becoming one of the best riders in the territory. Samuel and Maria's partnership deepened into genuine love, the kind that's built on mutual respect and shared purpose. They added to the library, expanded the ranch, and became pillars of the growing community. When a new school was built in Medicine Bow, Samuel donated the land and materials. Maria served on the school board, ensuring every child in the territory had access to education. On Clara's 13th birthday, Samuel took her riding to the ridge where he'd first seen her through his spyglass. They sat on their horses, looking out over the vast prairie. "Do you ever think about that day?" Clara asked. "When you found me?" "Every day. It was the day my life started again." "Mine too." Clara touched the locket around her neck, the one Samuel had given her years ago. Inside was a photograph from her adoption day. Samuel, Maria, and Clara, all smiling, all together. "I used to wonder why Mama died, why Papa died, why Martha was so cruel. It all seemed so unfair. It was unfair. But if none of that had happened, I wouldn't have ended up here, with you and Mama Maria. I wouldn't have this life, this family. So maybe—" She paused, searching for words. "Maybe the bad things happened so the good things could happen too." Samuel thought about Catherine and baby Thomas, about the decade of grief and loneliness he'd endured, about how finding Clara had cracked open his heart and let life back in, about how Maria's patient love had healed wounds he'd thought would never close. "Maybe you're right, sweetheart. Maybe you're right." They rode back to the ranch together as the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Below them, the lights of the Double H glowed warm and welcoming. Maria would be in the kitchen, preparing dinner. Tom and the ranch hands would be finishing their day's work. Everything and everyone Samuel loved was there, in that house that had once been so empty. That evening, the three of them sat together in the library as they had so many times before. Samuel read aloud while Maria knitted and Clara curled up with her own book. It was ordinary, domestic, perfect. Later, tucking Clara into bed, she still let him do this sometimes, even at 13. Samuel kissed her forehead. "Papa?" Clara said sleepily. "Yes, sweetheart?" "Thank you for not riding away. That day on the prairie. Thank you for choosing me." Samuel's throat tightened. "Thank you for trusting me, for giving me the chance to be your father. You saved me just as much as I saved you." He descended the stairs to find Maria waiting, and together they walked through their home, past the photographs on the walls documenting their journey as a family, past Clara's room where she slept safe and loved, past the empty rooms that were no longer empty because they were full of hope and possibility. Outside, the Wyoming night stretched vast and star-filled over the prairie. Somewhere out there was the spot where Samuel had found a small girl clutching a ragged doll,
abandoned and alone. That girl was gone now, replaced by a confident young woman with a future as bright as those stars. Samuel wrapped his arm around Maria's waist, and she leaned into him, comfortable and content. They'd built something remarkable together, not just a ranch or a fortune, but a family, the kind of family that wasn't defined by blood, but by choice, by love, by the daily decision to show up for each other. Happy? Maria asked. Happier than I ever thought I'd be again, Samuel admitted. You? Very happy. We have everything that matters. And they did. They had each other. They had Clara. They had a home that rang with laughter instead of echoing with loneliness. They had a future full of possibilities instead of a past full of regrets. The orphan girl who'd been left to die on the trail had found her family. The broken rancher who'd lost everything had found his purpose. And the patient woman who'd waited for love had found her place. Together, they'd built something beautiful from the ashes of tragedy. They'd proved that family wasn't about blood or legal documents, but about the bonds forged through love and choice and commitment. As Samuel looked out at his land, his home, his life, he whispered a prayer of thanks for the second chance he'd been given, for the daughter who'd saved him, for the wife who'd loved him back to life, for the family they'd become. The lights of the Double H Ranch glowed warm against the Wyoming darkness, a beacon of home in the vast frontier. And inside those walls, 3 people who'd been broken and lost had found each other and become whole. That was the real story. Not the abandonment or the rescue, not the legal battles or the happy ending. It was the story of how love transforms, how family heals, how 3 lonely souls found each other and built something that would last forever. And it was perfect.